The Permanent Subcommittee on Investigations will come to order. Thank you all for your attendance. Thanks to the public tuning into these proceedings. Ranking Member Johnson, thank you for all of your work as our staffs, and we have collaborated on this investigation focused on the mistreatment of military families in privatized housing on U.S. military installations. In the mid-90s, when the Department of Defense commenced the privatization of military housing, it was envisioned that this initiative would lead to better outcomes for military families, safer, more reliable living conditions, healthy homes, affordable housing available to families living on and around U.S. military installations. For years, however, this program has been plagued by problems. And when I visited Fort Gordon in the first few months of my term in the Senate, I asked the command if I could sit down with families on post to hear about their experiences living in privatized housing managed by Balfour Beatty at Fort Gordon. And the stories that I heard shocked me. I heard stories about maintenance requests that were ignored, maintenance requests that were never followed up on, and not just routine maintenance, but maintenance that impacted the health and safety of our service members and their families living in their homes. And those families at Fort Gordon, they asked me to take action. And so using my authority as the chair of the Permanent Subcommittee on Investigations and working closely in a bipartisan way with my colleague, Ranking Member Johnson, who in his past capacity chairing the Homeland Security Committee has led substantive oversight investigations of related matters, we embarked upon an 8-month intensive investigation looking into these allegations of mistreatment of military families at U.S. installations. We focused on Fort Gordon in Georgia and Shepherd Air Force Base in Texas. And the results of this investigation are alarming, are disturbing, reveal injustice imposed on service members and their families, reveal grave risks to the health and safety of service members and their families, reveal neglect by Balfour Beatty, which is responsible for housing tens of thousands of military families, and reveal not just neglect, and in my view, misconduct and abuse, but neglect, misconduct, and abuse that persisted even after Balfour Beatty pled guilty to a scheme to defraud the United States between 2013 and 2019. Today we're going to hear from service members who have joined us to share their personal family stories of living in Balfour Beatty housing. We will hear from advocates, military spouses, who will share what they've learned from their personal experiences and advocating for the families who live on post and live on installations across the United States. And then we will ask tough questions of senior executives at Balfour Beatty, demand answers and accountability. Again, I want to emphasize this has been a bipartisan effort from start to finish. Ranking Member Johnson has been a great partner in this effort. I thank my staff and his staffs for their tireless work, reviewing tens of thousands of pages of records, interviewing dozens of witnesses. I thank our witnesses for joining us today, in particular, the service members who I'll introduce after our opening statements, who have come to share their stories, who have displayed the bravery, courage, and dedication that we know and expect from those who serve in the armed forces and are doing a great public service by joining us today and sharing their stories. And with that, I'll yield to Ranking Member Johnson.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I also want to thank the members of the military for their service and our witnesses for their testimony today. I really appreciated the cooperation you and I had, our staffs as well. And it's true, it's bipartisan. I always like using the term nonpartisan. And I think what allows for that kind of nonpartisan cooperation is when you focus on things we all agree on. I'll keep my opening statement short. I'll enter my written statement in the ask that it be entered in the record. But let me just read just one paragraph from it, because this is, I think, the goal we all share. Service members represent the finest among us. I don't think there's any dispute. We agree on that. They and their families make many sacrifices in service to this great nation. When stationed in U.S. military installations, these men and women should expect to live in conditions that will not damage the health and safety of themselves and their family. I think it states it pretty simply, and that's why we were able to, I think, do a really good job digging into this, going through all those documents. Again, I appreciate all the work on the staff. I think in the end, and I'm looking forward to hearing the testimony and asking questions, the question that kept going through my mind throughout this investigation, going through our report, is the statement, fool me once, shame on you. Fool me twice, shame on me. So you have a settlement, $65 million penalties and fines, and then 2 years later, it seems like it's pretty much going on as it was prior to the fine being imposed. So I'm kind of wondering, what is the military doing about this? How can we get this under control? This seems to be a problem that has just plagued military housing. Military doesn't want to deal with housing, so you contract it outside, and then you don't set up the controls so the contractors do the type of job that we all expect. So again, I appreciate the cooperation. Look forward to the hearing.
Thank you, Ranking Member Johnson. We will now call our first panel of witnesses for this morning's hearing. I'll introduce the witnesses, and then you'll stand to be sworn. Captain Samuel Cho is with the U.S. Army and lived in Balfour housing at the Fort Gordon Army Base in Georgia, where he was assigned to the 202nd Military Intelligence Battalion from August 2019 until last month, when he was posted to South Korea with the 1st Signal Brigade. Captain Cho and his wife have 3 children, and he comes from a family that has been devoted to national service. His father served in the 82nd Airborne Division. His uncle is a Special Forces and Ranger qualified battalion deputy commander, and his aunt is a Navy nurse practitioner. Thank you, Captain Cho, to you and your family for this extraordinary service. I would note Captain Cho is testifying today in his personal capacity and is not testifying in any official capacity, nor is he representing the views of the U.S. Army or any military service. Technical Sergeant Jack Fitoris is with the 366th Training Squadron of the U.S. Air Force and has lived on base at the Shepherd Air Force Base in Texas, in Balfour provided housing since August 2020 with his wife and 3 children. He deployed 3 times in support of Operation Enduring Freedom and has been with the U.S. Air Force since 2009. Like Captain Cho, Sergeant Torres also testifying today in his personal capacity and is not testifying in any official capacity, nor is he representing the views of the U.S. Army or any military service. Ms. Rachel Christian is founder and chief legislative officer of Armed Forces Housing Advocates, or AFHA, a national organization representing military families that was founded in 2019. Thank you, Ms. Christian. And Ms. Jana Wanner is a military spouse who has lived in on-base housing at Fort Gordon in Georgia and at Fort Meade in Maryland, and has become an advocate for other families struggling with housing issues on U.S. military installations, particularly at Fort Gordon in Georgia. On behalf of the subcommittee and the Senate, we deeply appreciate your presence today. Look forward to your testimony. I would ask you now to stand and raise your right hands to be sworn in, and remind you that this testimony will be under oath. Do you swear the testimony you will give before this subcommittee will be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth, so help you God? Thank you. Please be seated. Let the record reflect that the witnesses answered in the affirmative. We will be using a timing system today. All of your written testimony will be printed in the record in its entirety. We ask that you limit your oral testimony to 5 minutes. Captain Cho, we'll begin with you. You are now welcome to deliver your opening statement.
Good morning, Chairman Ossoff, Ranking Member Johnson, and members of the subcommittee. It is my professional and personal honor to participate in this proceeding regarding the deficiencies in privatized housing provided to service members and our families at Fort Gordon, Georgia, as well as other communities throughout the United States Army. And this housing community is furnished and provided by Balfour Beatty Communities Also, the personal experience that my family and I've had while residing on Balfour Beatty will be the crux of my testimony for today. A brief history about myself. I am a prior enlisted soldier. I used to be an intelligence analyst prior to my commissioning as an officer. I currently have 12 years of service. Before my military service, I worked as a banker for JP Morgan and for Wells Fargo as well. As Senator Ossoff mentioned, I have a family, my wife, and 3 children. My son, Nathaniel, he's 14 years old. I call him my pride. I have my daughter, Sherilyn, who is the subject of today's testimony. She is my heart. And then also have my son, Luca. He's 11 months old. I call him my joy. Between my family and my service, I find my life to be rather full and fulfilling. But the crux of my testimony today is due to the fact of my daughter, Sherilyn in particular, the mistreatment and the negligence that she was subject to while we resided at 149A Cypress Circle at Fort Gordon, Georgia, circa August 2019 up until February of 2021. Prior to that, my family and I had never resided on any military installation. I had resided on a military installation through my father and my mother before my military service, but I do not recall ever seeing the type of conditions that we had lived under while we were at Fort Gordon. My wife and I have found that my daughter's experience is life-altering and that it will haunt her as well as us for the rest of our lives. She is diagnosed with a condition called severe atopic dermatitis to the point where it's potentially fatal. Unfortunately, the basis of her condition was founded upon what she was exposed to while we resided on post at Fort Gordon by the home which was managed by Balfour Beatty. My daughter, prior to her condition, was a very exuberant and bright and vibrant young lady, very social, very amicable, willing to talk to anyone, stranger, family member, friend, whoever it may be. Now, due to her condition, she is reticent in engaging with anyone outside of her immediate circle. The literal scars of her experience haunt her and plague her to this day. My wife and I have found that this is something that unfortunately will resonate with us for the rest of our lives, and all we seek is to provide the most factual and personal testimony that we can here today. I'm very proud that I can stand here or stay here before the subcommittee and to everyone present that I represent my daughter and my family, because I'm the only person that can suffer for her. I'm the only person that can truly show the world the narrative of what we had experienced while we resided at Fort Gordon through the home that was managed by Balfour Beatty. It is my desire to ensure that everyone in the subcommittee is fully aware of the circumstances, to include a timeline, to include key individuals, to include the locations, to include folks who are employed by Balfour Beatty, as well as certain members of the Garrison at Fort Gordon as well. There is negligence across the board here, and it is my desire to bring that to light as conclusively as possible so that way an executive decision can be made that will positively impact families going forward. Unfortunately, my daughter will still have her condition endure. Thank you for your time, Senator.
Thank you, Captain Cho, for your testimony. Tech Sergeant Torres, we will now hear from you.
Chairman Ossoff, Ranking Member Johnson, and members.
And you'll need to activate your microphone.
Chairman Ossoff, Ranking Member Johnson, and members of the subcommittee. My name is Technical Sergeant Jack Fay Torres, and I thank you for the opportunity to testify today. I have served in the Air Force for 13 years, and we moved into our home in August of 2020 at Shepherd Air Force Base, Texas. After moving in, my wife and children started experiencing a wide variety of medical symptoms. After realizing we felt better outside of our home and realized that mold was likely a threat. The first major work order we reported was on March 4th, 2021, for our water heater. During the repair, a Balfour Beatty technician forgot to isolate the water and gas valves. This caused the entire house to smell of gas, and water began rushing out into our mechanical room and hallway. I vacuumed as much water from the carpets as I could and put a personal fan in the area. Afterwards, the maintenance supervisor assured us that it was not possible for mold to grow in the area and not to worry. This was the first time we believed that our work order history did not reflect the true state of repairs within our home. For example, the technician noted that he had placed a fan and picked it up, when actually I had placed a personal fan. Issues with the work orders have continued while living in the home. Work orders will be open and closed before completion frequently, or worse, a work order will be attempted to be repaired, and when we report the issue is unresolved, a new ticket will be opened. The maintenance database then looks as if two different issues arose, when in reality, a superficial fix occurred and a new work order was created. On May 27th, we discovered waterlogged trim and placed a work order. Our issues were not resolved, and we then reported it to the Government Housing Office and Resident Advocate. When our issues were still not being resolved, we contacted the Armed Forces Housing Advocate, and with their involvement, we located more moisture and mold issues in and under our mechanical room. I then reported our issues to my command and local congressional representative. On June 11th, we emailed Balfour Beatty to request a professional mold test. Balfour Beatty did not promptly acknowledge the extent of mold or arrange for a professional mold test. At that point, we were frustrated with the delays and took it upon ourselves to send tape lift tests to a lab, where it was confirmed that mold was present. Balfour Beatty dismissed our concerns. At one point, we were told that a large spot of mold in our mechanical room wall was just a burn mark. Eventually, on June 24th, a licensed mold assessor, Ecosystems Environmental, inspected our home. It was not until this day that an environmental work order was put in the system, 4 weeks after we originally reported our concerns. Their report dated July 2nd cited visible growth throughout the home. Elevated moisture levels were found in more than 175 square feet of our walls, including the bathroom and kitchen. They recommended that all impacted walls be repaired. Balfour Beatty then hired another environmental company, Exponent, to review this report, and on July 9th, they issued a new report that did not require all repairs of the first report to be made and simply stated that some issues could wait for a change of occupancy. On August 4th, we were displaced for the first time. We hoped that our problems would be resolved, but after moving back in 4 weeks later, we found many issues unrepaired. There was even visible mold underneath the mechanical room and in the kitchen. Work was completed with Band-Aid fixes or ignored altogether. We immediately reported the remaining issues via residential portal, and the work orders were marked web entered. It was later changed to the category carpentry. New caulk was placed, cabinets were sanded, and the issues in the mechanical room were ignored. The work orders were closed as completed, never indicating that mold was still present. Shortly after moving back in, my family and I began to experience the same medical problems we had previously. On January 10, 2022, we discovered mold growing on our wall in our kitchen. A Balfour Beatty technician indicated to me that there may be a slab leak in our foundation, but Balfour Beatty has never provided us a complete scope of work. We were displaced again, this time for 12 weeks. These displacements caused my family great amounts of stress, as you can imagine having a 2-, 5-, and 8-year-old without their comforts of home. I was also passed over a supervisory role due to my family's housing situation. I believe if the general upkeep of my home had been taken seriously by Balfour Beatty, as was indicated in the first environmental report, our displacements could have been prevented. While hesitant to tell my family's story of how Balfour Beatty has treated us, I remain hopeful that Congress will seriously address what military families around the country continue to experience. Our military families should not be forced to live in fear of their own homes. Thank you, and a special thank you to the Armed Forces Housing Advocates.
Thank you, Sergeant Torres. Ms. Christian, your opening remarks, please.
Chairman Ossoff, Ranking Member Johnson, and members of the subcommittee, thank you for the opportunity to testify before you today and for allowing the Armed Forces Housing Advocates to share the stories of thousands of military families that have been impacted by the systemic failures of the Military Housing Privatization Initiative. My name is Rachel Christian, and I am one of the founders of the Armed Forces Housing Advocates. AFA is a nonprofit organization that was formed out of necessity to provide direct advocacy services to military families living in privatized housing across the nation. Since May of 2021, we have assisted over 1,500 families residing in military housing. Personally, I have been advocating for families since 2018. AFA takes a grassroots approach to advocacy. This gives us a unique view of the current process and procedures in military housing across the United States. In the past year, I have seen environmental hazards such as mold, lead, asbestos, and raw sewage being improperly handled by untrained staff and work orders being closed prior to completion by Balfour Beatty employees. I have witnessed service members in tears due to the fear of losing their careers after Balfour Beatty attempted to use their commands to silence them for speaking further about unsafe conditions in their homes. I have seen denied maintenance requests and closures of work orders simply due to Balfour Beatty not wanting to foot the cost of completing necessary maintenance and repairs. At Whiteman Air Force Base, a large tree limb fell on a car, which just moments prior held an infant inside. The request to remove the dying tree from the yard was denied by Balfour Beatty in the months prior to the incident. The most morally egregious behavior I've seen while assisting military families residing in Balfour Beatty homes is the ways in which individuals with disabilities are treated and their civil rights consistently violated. Disabled military families are being faced with excessive red tape when requesting reasonable accommodations and modifications to their homes. The excessive request for documentation and personal information, as well as the length of time it takes to get a request approved, violates the law. It is inexcusable that a military spouse should need to be bathed by her husband because Balfour Beatty refuses to provide proper accommodations for her disability in her bathroom. Her husband, as the service member, should not be in constant fear of leaving for training or deployment because he is unsure if his wife will be safe in their home. The safety inside of a Balfour Beatty home is questionable at best. I have seen sick and injured military families that have been dismissed repeatedly when bringing forth their concerns that their homes have made them sick. A child at Fort Bliss tested high for lead in their blood. After certified testing was completed, it showed higher than allowable levels of lead-based paint dust in the home. Yet still, Balfour Beatty denied that the lead-based paint in the home was responsible and refused to abate or encapsulate the lead-based paint. That home is still available for unsuspecting families to move into today. These medical conditions are not only harming our military families, but are also costing military treatment facilities and TRICARE millions of dollars in medical care, which could be avoided if the homes were properly maintained. The issues I have cited are only a small portion of the problems, and they are not unique to one installation or location. They are mirrored from one to the other. Balfour Beatty often claims that the problems we see are regional with a few bad actors, but we strongly disagree with this notion. When corporate leadership is directing the actions of local employees, the issues are inherently systemic. A little over 3 years ago, I sat in this very building listening to the Senate Armed Services Committee discuss the deplorable conditions in military housing, including those run by Balfour Beatty. How many more cases of negligence, fraud, and civil rights violations must we present in this building before Balfour Beatty is properly held accountable and banned from receiving further government contracts, as well as removed from their current partnership with the Department of Defense? Balfour Beatty has already admitted to defrauding the government, but it is not just the government that suffered in this case. It's the service members, and it's their families. They are the ones being forgotten, pushed aside, and made sick by a company that continues to choose profits over people. When our service members are exploited by the very companies that promise to protect them, our troops are not operationally ready. No service member should have to choose between a costly, reasonable accommodation for their family member or purchasing groceries. No service member should be losing sleep on deployment, worried that their family is sick or injured in their home. And no service member and their family should be homeless while serving this great country. It is time that our service members and their families are all treated with the dignity and respect they deserve. The military community lost their faith in Balfour Beatty due to their continued disregard for the health and safety of the families residing in their homes. We believe that ending the partnership with Balfour Beatty is the only way to ensure the readiness of our service members and the safety of their families. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Christian. Ms. Warner, we will now hear your opening statement, please.
Chairman Ossoff, Ranking Member Johnson, members of the subcommittee, thank you for the invitation to participate in today's hearing. My name is Jana Warner. I've been a proud Army spouse for the past 12 years. My husband is a Sergeant First Class, and he has been in the Army for 15 years. We have 2 children, one with special needs, who is enrolled in the department's Exceptional Family Member Program. Like most military families, our family has moved often. We are currently at our 5th duty station, but at Fort Gordon for a second time. During our first tour at Fort Gordon in 2013, we arrived from Germany and did not have enough time to look for off-post housing. After waiting in a hotel for over 2 weeks, we were offered a home that had an active leak from the refrigerator, cigarette butts scattered on the stairs, as well as dirt and roaches on the kitchen floor. When questioned about the condition of the home, the Balfour staff member stated that roaches are normal in Georgia and that the contractors must have accidentally left their used cigarette butts behind. Over the next few months, we had frequent work orders to include leaks, mold issues, an air conditioner that did not work properly, and at one point it was declared a fire hazard. After 5 months of living in these conditions, we moved to a home outside of the installation. I began my advocacy 4 years ago while stationed in Maryland. After our own experiences as a family with the lack of appropriate accommodations for our special needs child and mold issues in our home, I decided to speak about the conditions military families are living in. After returning to Fort Gordon for the second time in 2019, I started hearing from military families living on the installation with various housing concerns. Myself, Mrs. Webster, and Mrs. Dykes created a private Facebook group that is specifically for Fort Gordon families with housing issues. On average, each month, we help dozens of families with the ongoing problems of Balfour's mismanagement of the homes on the installation, lack of prompt response to repairs such as leaks, mold, as well as lack of transparency about the wait list for on-post housing. Sewage leaks, pest issues, these are just a few of the things that we frequently hear about from families. Work orders for maintenance requests go unaddressed or ignored for months at a time in some cases. More specifically, one resident has had work orders open since December 2021, requesting repairs to their master bedroom ceiling with water damage. The ceiling appears to be caving in from the damage, but maintenance has not addressed their concerns since putting the work orders in. Several other residents have reported similar experiences with leaks causing water damage, with limited communication from maintenance about repairs and work orders that have been left open with no timeline given for the repairs. When residents have requested a move-in checklist to document pre-existing damages, housing staff has stated that there is no official form to document those damages. Residents are then told to send an email to the housing office with photos and descriptions of the damages, and they will be kept on their file. However, after several residents had reached out to confirm their emails were on file to prepare for a move-out inspection, they were told that their documentation was never received. ADA accommodations requests or other reasonable accommodations requests have also been ignored or denied. There are currently no standard proof requirements for accommodation needs. Balfour is inconsistent with the information that they request to prove the need for reasonable accommodations. Some families have made reasonable requests for accommodations and were promised one-level homes, only to arrive to find out that what they were offered was not a one-level home. Other families have requested ADA homes due to the medical need, only to be placed on a several months-long wait list due to Balfour not leaving the homes available for need-based families. The fear of retaliation by Balfour and a lack of clarity on how to report are common reasons that have prevented families from reporting their issues. Residents have frequently discussed what is sometimes described as verbally abusive staff that deters them from speaking up any further. For families that have never lived in military housing before, the process to dispute is even more confusing and unclear. The Tenant Bill of Rights and the dispute process were well-intentioned, but more oversight is still needed, such as more thorough inspections that are not just based on cosmetic appearance of the homes, but also ensuring that families with special needs do not have extra layers of red tape to have access to ADA homes or reasonable accommodations. Military families make sacrifices every day. A safe home should not be one of them. Thank you, Senators, for the opportunity to testify and for addressing the health and safety of military families.
Thank you, Ms. Warner, for your opening remarks. I will now recognize myself to begin questions of our first panel. Captain Cho and Sergeant Torres, I want to thank you again in particular for joining us and for your service to the country. Captain Cho, you recently deployed with your family to Camp Humphreys in South Korea, and you just flew 7,000 miles on a 17-hour flight to testify here today. Can you take a moment and explain to the subcommittee why you felt it was so important to be here? And if you wouldn't mind making sure your microphone is close enough to capture your remarks. Thank you, Captain Cho.
Thank you, Chairman. It's quite simple. My daughter. No one else will speak up for my daughter. No matter how many times I spoke up for my daughter while we resided on post at Fort Gordon, especially notifying Balfour Beatty throughout dozens of interactions, whether it was via work orders or whether it was in person, whether it was submitting concerns via telephone with their primary point of contact through their facilities manager there, it was all for naught. The reason why I'm here before everyone is because my daughter is still under the same health conditions that she initially contracted due to the home itself. And we were informed that this is a potential lifelong condition, and this is also a potentially fatal condition if she is exposed to the right circumstances of black mold and mildew, which proliferated the home that we resided in while we were at Fort Gordon during our time there. The timeline that we resided there was from August 2019 up until February 2021. My daughter, her skin once youthful and supple, is now reptilian in nature, to where there were numerous times she would wake up in the middle of the night, hands covered in blood from her scratching while sleeping, and her bed sheets are also covered in her own blood. How do you explain to an 8-year-old child why she should endure something like that? If it was something that my wife and I could control, by all means, we would take responsibility and do the very best that we could as her parents to ensure that she is not under those same conditions going forward. But the conditions that we resided in is due to outside factors beyond our control, primarily championed by Balfour Beatty, who provides direct oversight to the homes at Fort Gordon and across numerous military installations throughout the DoD. It is very important that I'm here today, regardless of however much time it takes for me to fly from one part of the world to another, so that way I can provide the accurate truth of what we endured. My daughter's condition is to the extent where she has received a very powerful and potent injection called Dupixent, which retails for between $3,000 to $5,000 per injection. Starting from July of 2021, correct, up until February of this year, she received injections twice a month. I broached concern that if my military service were to be concluded prior to a retirement, then what would happen to my daughter? That means we will be potentially paying over $70,000 to $100,000 in out-of-pocket expenses for an injection that she should receive due to the circumstances that she was exposed to outside of her control and our control at Fort Gordon through Balfour Beatty. Chairman, I don't know how to convey to you any more strongly how much that this has impacted her. Her sense of self, her sense of worth, of who she is, has forever been changed. Again, I mentioned that she was a very vibrant and social young lady, and now she is withdrawn, reticent. She has sought counseling services through her school. She has sought military counseling services as well, to include the chaplain at my previous organization prior to my departure from Fort Gordon. It goes without saying that this is something that is always on her mind. There's times where normally most parents would ask their child, "How was your day today? What happened at school? What did you learn? What was your homework? Do you have anything to give to us so we can sign to get back to your teachers?" My first question is, how is your skin today? How do you feel today? Are you itchy? Are you bleeding? Show me your rashes. She resembles a burn victim at her worst. And her worst ebbs and flows because her condition will subside and then flare up periodically every month to 2 months, despite any injection that we provide her, despite any ointment, topical treatment that we provide her, prescribed or over-the-counter. Yes, sir.
And Captain Cho, had your daughter ever had rashes like that, the symptoms of the severe dermatitis that she's developed prior to moving into your Balfour home at Fort Gordon?
She exhibited her rashes only after residing on post at Fort Gordon.
And with your permission, I'm going to ask that slide 32 be depicted to the subcommittee, which shows some of these symptoms. And you can take that down now. I want to ask you, Captain Cho, you went to see an allergy specialist on post a number of times in the early months of these symptoms developing in your daughter. What were you advised by medical professionals?
The medical professional at the time who treated her throughout pretty much the majority of her condition, he informed my wife and I that at first he tried to determine certain factors were in play. If she was exposed to the only 2 other allergens that she has, which is a mild allergy to cats and dogs, we responded quite promptly no, because we do not own any pets. Our neighbors do not own any pets. My daughter does not interact with any pets due to that. It was shortly afterwards where, after conducting a series of skin tests and blood tests, that he determined that she has the allergy or the condition for dermatitis, atopic dermatitis, but to such an extent where it's severe, and we were informed, alarmingly, that it was potentially fatal.
And Captain Cho, you then raised this issue with Balfour. They came in February 2020. I understand they told you that they didn't find mold in the home. Was that the end of your family's concern with mold, or did you continue to raise the concern about mold in your home with Balfour in the months that followed?
I fervently brought my concerns to Balfour Beatty in one form or another via communication, telephone or in person or through email correspondence, from the very beginning up into my departure from that home in 2021, February.
And let me ask you, during this period in the middle of 2020 when you were reporting to Balfour the urgency of your request that mold you were observing in your home be remediated, were you doing that mostly in person or by the phone?
My apologies, Chairman. Can you ask the question one more time?
Were you making those reports and requests to Balfour principally in person and by the phone?
We primarily provided our work orders via the portal that was provided to residents at Fort Gordon. And once we were notified by my daughter's physician of her condition, we submitted a work order for mold. A test was conducted. We were told at the time it was inconclusive, that it was negative. But we continued to press the point, and we were told to contact the manager of the Balfour Beatty organization there at Fort Gordon directly. I was actually handed her business card, and that going forward, I needed to communicate with her directly or with her staff, to which I attempted to numerous times.
So let me just make sure I understand, Captain Cho. Were you specifically instructed by Balfour personnel that you should, moving forward, raise these concerns directly, verbally, or by phone rather than via the online portal?
That is correct.
So Balfour personnel told you to cease using the online portal and instead to place those requests for help directly in person or by phone?
Yes, that is correct. Not just a supervisor, it was the manager of the Balfour Beatty communities at Fort Gordon herself.
Thank you. We're going to dig more into your story and Sergeant Torres' story in a moment. I'm going to yield in a moment to the ranking member. Before I do, I just want to ask you to turn, Captain Cho, to Exhibit 2. This is an email that you sent to Ms. Paula Cook at Balfour months and months later, after, as I understand it, your requests for assistance with mold in your home had been ignored for months. You had been instructed by Balfour personnel, rather than using the online portal, to place those requests verbally or by phone. You, at the advice of your doctor, had then sought to break your lease. Balfour had sought to prevent you from breaking your lease. You had to engage your chain of command.
Yes. That's correct.
Eventually, after engaging your chain of command, and again, this is while living for months in a home where there was mold and your daughter's health was severely impacted, you finally were able to get out of that home.
Yes, that's correct.
We're going to get into how Balfour nevertheless then pursued you for collection. But I want to just ask you to read the final few sentences on the second page of this email, beginning with, "I am just a soldier." Do you see that, Captain Cho? In the middle of the final paragraph of this email?
I am just a soldier, husband, and father, attempting to reconcile why this had to take place. My family and I were not aware that we were at the mercy of executive decisions made at Balfour Beatty, which were detrimental to my daughter's health. You, Ms. Cook, along with your representatives, could have accomplished much more, yet thus far have chosen not to.
Thank you, Captain Cho, and Sergeant Torres will engage with you in the second round of questioning. At this time, I yield to Ranking Member Johnson.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I think I got one of my first questions answered. Is your daughter improving at all? Doesn't sound like she is at all.
No, Senator, she is not.
So I want to explore, because I think a number of you mentioned retaliation. That would be retaliation by your command, right? So I want to understand the finger pointing, the shifting responsibility in terms of what all's transpired here. Captain Cho, your daughter was treated by military doctors?
She was treated initially on post by military doctors, and then she was referred off post as well. And she oftentimes went back and forth between the two.
So, do the military doctors, did they assign a cause to her skin condition? I mean, did they say this is typical of a rash brought about by mold?
Only at the initial period. After her 2 initial appointments, the epidemiologist made the determination that it has to be something that's triggering her condition specifically, and if she's only going to school and home, that it has to be something either at the home or the school itself.
Did the doctor or anybody in the medical clinic try and follow up to see what the conditions were in the home that might have been given rise to her skin condition?
Yes, he certainly did. He definitely followed up with myself and I. We corresponded via phone communication as well as email dozens of times to try and pinpoint the cause of her condition, which he surmised at the beginning, but he did not want to influence me indirectly or directly that it was the home itself.
So did he then advocate for you to the base commander?
No, he did not. I had to go through outside channels to have the Garrison command eventually become involved.
So what was the response from Garrison command?
Quite frankly, I was told by the Garrison commander and the Garrison sergeant major that they thought that this was not founded and that my daughter's condition was not predicated upon being exposed to mold at the home itself, to which I was quite upset about.
So they just dismissed any connection between housing and your daughter's condition?
This was after several months of waiting for the Garrison command team to make an executive decision to fund our move off post, or at least give us the opportunity to break our lease at that time. That's correct.
So then your only channel of addressing this was then to go to Balfour? So I mean, you were pretty well left on your own to deal with the situation. You got no help from your base commander, your garrison commander, or anybody in the military chain of command?
The base commander himself, I don't believe he was aware of my family. It
Okay.
was the Garrison command. But I used concurrent lines of effort to try and mitigate this between the physicians and him providing memorandums to state that my daughter's condition is what it is, as well as my chain of command, as well as the Garrison command. I found that the Garrison command failed me. I found that the physician was only tied because he can only do so much. He is not a person of influence. He can only provide facts and his findings to whoever reviews that information. So I had to use my direct chain of command, which they in turn actually determined that this was warranted, and they influenced the change that was necessary for us to ultimately break our lease and leave the home itself.
So in the end, you did get help from your chain of command in terms of at least getting out of that housing?
After much effort, yes.
Did somebody else move into that house after you then?
Immediately after.
So Sergeant Torres, I think you're kind of understanding my line of questioning here. Can you kind of relay your experience in terms of, I'll call it a runaround. You know, what type of runaround did you experience? And you mentioned retaliation. Can you be more specific in terms of kind of what happened as you just tried to get your issues addressed? And again, I see from your testimony, your family experienced a wide range of symptoms. Yes. Get the microphone as quickly as possible. I'm a little hard of hearing.
Yes, I told my Balfour Beatty about all of our issues, and when we were trying to get it all addressed, and we were not getting anywhere, you know, we went contacted government housing office, and even with, you know, contacting them and the resident advocate on the base, as we were still not getting the help that we needed. Eventually, we
So just back up. Describe the government housing.
we notified them, the government housing office.
Now, is that in the military chain of command, or
Yes, sir.
Okay.
Yeah, in military chain of command, you know,
and they report up to?
They report up to the base and wing commander. So if there's any issues, you know, we address to the government housing office, and they kind of advocate or help us out to kind of contact the housing, you know, Balfour Beatty, in terms of, hey, you know, there's issues in the homes, and, you know, can we get these issues addressed? And even with contacting them, we had to constantly email them. We had to request them to show up to the inspections, because if we didn't, they weren't going to show up. And we kind of were trying to prove, like, hey, we do have issues in our home. Can you please show up? And then we were getting nowhere. We had to actually resort to requesting for an advocate out at an Army base, you know, an hour away to get any help. And, you know, Sarah Klein has done more help to us for our family at a completely another base on our Army post than the advocate and the government housing office on my base, and even come to the point where when we were being dislocated, my commander notified me that I was being dislocated, which I didn't even heard from, and he was trying to get information because he wasn't in on any of the information when that's actually the government housing office supposed to be telling the wing commander and the base commander about our issues, and he didn't even know nothing about our issues.
So is it fair to say that the government housing advocate didn't do much advocating for you?
No, they didn't do anything.
Pretty well just blew off your concerns.
Correct.
Ms. Christian, you obviously have dealt with, you said 1,500 individuals like Captain Cho and Sergeant Torres. Can you kind of summarize what you're seeing, or do you have some particular examples? I mean, is this very typical that there's just, it's just a big runaround, there's a bunch of finger pointing and nothing ever gets done?
Absolutely. You will see this everywhere that you go when you're trying to get assistance to get any even minor request, completed in your home. These are, cases of systemic issues in their home, but even something as simple as, I need like the toilet recocked because it's going to start leaking. Like, you're not going to be able to get somebody to come out to your home to fix that in a timely manner. And if you do try and seek assistance from like the government housing office, they will tell you flat out that they have no power to force Balfour or any of the other housing companies to act in your home, and that their scope is limited. And then when they go up to the installation level to go see JAG or go see an advocate on the legal side, a lot of our families are being told, maybe you should get a lawyer. From the base legal offices, which is not something that we need military families concerned about trying to understand, or a process that they should be really having to go through to get simple fixes in their homes.
So I think, I'm over time, I think the phrase you just used, the agencies or within the chain of command that should have the power are telling members of the military they have no power.
Correct.
I think that's kind of a key part right there. Is that true? And if they don't have the power, why not? Why hasn't the military empowered them to make this right? But thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Ranking Member Johnson. Senator Carper, you're recognized for 7 minutes.
Thanks so much. I had an opportunity to personally welcome and greet our witnesses a few minutes ago. We have we all serve on a number of hearing committees and subcommittees. We're doing other hearings, so I'm going to be in and out here today, but thank you and welcome. A little bit about background, retired Navy captain, Vietnam veteran, last Vietnam veteran serving in the U.S. Senate. I've been privileged to literally live in military housing in places around the world in the past, and to represent the Dover Air Force Base as a congressman for 10 years, as a senator for 21 years, and as a governor for 8 years. I love that base. In fact, our community loves the Dover Air Force Base. There's something called the Abilene Trophy. I don't know if anyone's ever heard of the Abilene Trophy before, but it's an award that's made to communities at an Air Force Base every year around the country, where the community's just gone the extra mile to make sure that the men and women of the Air Force in that community are welcomed, loved, and we take really good care of them. So I don't think there's any community in America that's won the Abilene Trophy more than Dover. This is something that's part of our DNA. I might also add, I don't know that any Air Force airlift base around the world has won the Commander-in-Chief Award more than the Dover Air Force Base. Not only do we have these huge aircraft, C-5s and C-17s, but we also have, we are the place where, I think most people know of Dover in this country, is the place where the remains of our fallen heroes are returned to this country from abroad, and they're reunited with their families. So we care a lot about the folks who live there. When I remember a time when I was earlier in my time in public service, when we had base housing that families could stay in, and others in the Air Force, and it was okay, but not great. And the same situation around the country. A lot of base housing, government housing. Some of it was pretty good. Some of it was not very good. And I think it was during maybe the Reagan administration, I might be wrong on the timing there, but one of our administrations decided that we ought to try something different. I like to say, find out what works, do more of that, and to see if we could provide better housing for our families. And the idea came up with sort of a public-private partnership where a private sector would build and literally run largely the base housing in partnership with the local commands. Good idea, a good idea. And in a lot of bases, it's worked just fine. In some bases, including Dover, not so well. And we started hearing, 3 or 4 years ago from families on our base that some of the problems with mold and leakage and that kind of thing were of concern. And the families wanted something to be done about it. The company that they had the contract for housing on the Dover Air Force Base was not responsive to those concerns. And we worked very closely with the commanding officer of the base, the wing commander, and others on the base to make sure that that our families receive the kind of treatment they deserve. And we also pursued this with the Committee of Jurisdiction. That's the Armed Services Committee. About 2 years ago, the Armed Services Committee passed legislation at my urging, the urging of a lot of folks who have bases around the country, to better ensure that this model of providing base housing for families, that it was improved. And the preamble of the Constitution, which was adopted, believe it or not, 5 miles from the Dover Air Force Base, first adopted, ratified 5 miles from the Air Force Base. It starts off with these words: we the people of the United States, in order to provide a more perfect union, The idea is everything we do, we can do better. The expectation under those who have supported the change in law embodied in the Defense, NDA, the National Defense Act, was we got to do this better. We have to do this better. And I think, Mr. Chairman and to our ranking member, this hearing is a good opportunity to begin some oversight on the work, I think good work, that was done bipartisan way 2 years ago. So with that as a preface, I want to just jump to a question or two if I can. And for each of the witnesses, please. Start with Captain. Captain, in your view, were the reforms adopted by Congress through the Defense Authorization Act 2 years ago, were they satisfactory? Have they made the kind of difference we'd hope for military families?
No.
Okay, tell us more. I like to be precise and succinct, but tell us more.
For my family, if we have black mold in our bathroom, behind the walls, on the ceiling, on the shower curtains, in the children's bedroom, and we have used every avenue of communication to state that this is a concern that is ongoing, and if Balfour Beatty is acutely aware that my daughter has a serious health condition predicated from this, but yet no response, and in certain times we were told that we are lying about this, conclusively no.
Yeah. Let me ask is it? I want to get your rank right. Just go ahead and tell me. Technical sergeant. Yeah, I'll go ahead. Same question. We spent a lot of time. The Committee of Jurisdiction spent a whole lot of time trying to get the root cause of this problem, and said it was to try to fix it. One of the things they did is they basically said to the commanding officers of the base, like on our base, the wing commander, say, you have a responsibility here to do something to fix this problem. Let's take charge, and that's what's happened at my base, Dover. Please go ahead.
Yes, even with all of our issues, it seemed that even with the base commander and wing commander involved, it seemed like they still didn't have really the power to, because we requested to move to a different section, and even with them they couldn't didn't have enough power to really move us to a different section, all because I didn't have the rank required for that section. I even asked, I was like, hey, I'll even cough up the difference in terms of BAH out of my own pocket, just so we not have to live in the area where mold was known to be in a certain area of base housing.
Okay. Ms. Christian, really same question. In terms of the changes that we'd hoped for and expected coming to the 2020 legislation.
Yeah, I was really hopeful when Tenants' Bill of Rights and those pieces of legislation came down. Our team was really excited to see the implementation of them, but it's not working. We have 10-page leases that are now 110-page leases that military families are having to read because they were trying to create a universal lease that would simplify things, but really it exacerbated the problem, as well as the formal dispute process is 48 steps for Air Force service members. You have to take 48 steps to do the formal dispute process, which is unacceptable. And the families that we are seeing that are trying to use the dispute process or trying to even say like, oh, we need a habitable home because the Tenants' Bill of Rights guarantees a habitable home, the housing companies will come back and ask us our definition of habitability. So we have such a broad language in that, especially with industry standard being listed. You're expecting industry standard, but that's not across the board. So the oversight feature for the commanders, I would love to say that I've seen that go well, but that's where we see the most retaliation because now those installation commanders, now they're not all bad actors in that, but there are some who see this as a number that they're trying to not rack up on their installation for complaints because it's going directly to their leadership and it's going to reflect poorly on them. So I have witnessed installation commanders giving misinformation to disabled families about what the Fair Housing Act means. So they're not people who should be giving that type of information and trying to sway an individual one way or another to just stay quiet.
Ms. Vanner, I'm out of time, so I'm going to ask you to answer the same question for the record and just with in the weeks to come. Mr. Chairman, I think this is an important hearing. I think the question for me and the issue here is why haven't the reforms that were adopted 2 years ago worked better? I like to say if it isn't perfect, make it better. And there's work to be done here. And I think this subcommittee can provide very important oversight and work in conjunction with the authorizing committee, Armed Services Committee, to get a better result for our families. That's what we want. Last thing I would say, with a real strong economy, a huge number of jobs have been created in the last year or two. And one of the questions I always ask when I go to the base and meet with the wing commanders and so forth, I ask the question, how are they doing in retention and recruitment? Always ask. And one of the keys on retention and recruitment is how happy is your family, including how happy is your family with where they're living and the living conditions that they face every day. So this is a recruitment and retention issue as well. Thank you.
Thank you, Senator Carper. Senator Hassan, you're recognized for 7 minutes.
Well, thank you very much, Mr. Chair and Ranking Member Johnson, for this hearing. I want to thank the witnesses for being here, for your service, and for your willingness to speak out about such a critical issue for so many of our servicemen and women and their families. I am deeply concerned by the testimony we have heard today and the impact that similar conduct may have on my constituents. New Hampshire is home to Portsmouth Naval Shipyard, and the shipyard's nearby private military housing is also managed by Balfour Beatty. So, Ms. Christian and Ms. Warner, you have talked about this a little bit just now with Senator Carper, but how widespread is the misconduct by Balfour Beatty and other private housing contractors?
You will see it at every installation you go to. So 55 Balfour Beatty installations, I cannot come up with one where I haven't seen an issue with work order closures prior to completion or any type of mistreatment of military families.
Thank you, Ms. Warner.
I agree. It's widespread all over every base that is managed by Balfour Beatty. Work orders will remain open for months at a time, and ADA accommodations are not properly addressed for special needs families, disabled families.
Thank you. I'm going to follow up on that last point in just a minute, and I appreciated the testimony just now to Senator Carper about why things haven't gotten significantly better since the 2020 NDAA provisions, and we'll follow up with you on that as well. I want to go, Sergeant Torres, to a different issue. Your bad experience happened just last year, more than a year after the passage of private military housing reforms in the fiscal year 2020. National Defense Authorization Act. I want to dig into your experience to better understand what additional actions Congress may need to take. In your testimony, you said that Balfour Beatty misclassified your work request to address mold in your home as another type of repair, such as carpentry. To your knowledge, did the work order system retain any information about your original classification of the repair request as a mold request instead of a carpentry request?
No. So originally when we look at the report, it would be classified as something that's in there, and then maybe a day or a couple weeks later, the title will be changed. In terms of my background, I'm a HVAC technician, heating and air conditioning technician. So I'm working on work orders all the time, and I'm able to track, and look at these kind of stuff. And I know for a fact that if a customer puts in a request for a work order, the title should not be changed, and it should not be closed before completion.
Right.
You always have to verify, hey, did we fix it? Is it actually fixed? If not, then you're going to have to reopen. If it's closed, then you reopen the same work order. At least this is how it's done in the Air Force. We reopen the same work order, not close it and then open a new one.
Right. So I just want to confirm here. You are saying that no matter what you put in your initial work request, in your experience, Balfour Beatty was able to change the final record, classify the request as they preferred, and say whatever they wanted in the request record.
Yes, like changing the title, even the date was open, date was closed, any remarks and all that stuff. We have like screenshots of report histories of it being one thing and then the dates and everything be changed on another, and it would never match up. Okay. Even to this day, the work orders are still being changed, and I even received text messages that saying work orders being closed out, even though we're being displaced for 12 weeks. It's saying that the work order was still closed out weeks before.
So I want to follow up on both what you just said and what you just said about closing out the work orders. You have said that the work orders would frequently be closed before the work was complete or satisfactorily addressed, or that work orders would be closed after superficial fixes were complete, but without addressing the root problem, resulting in additional work orders later on. Did Balfour Beatty ever give you the option to keep work orders open when you did not believe the issue had been adequately addressed? If yes, were you pressured to close those work orders at all?
No, we didn't have any control over if the work order was like closed or if we can reopen it or not.
Right.
That was just pretty much all they would just tell us is just open a new work order.
Okay, so that is really deeply troubling. It's really concerning. Work orders are there to help residents get their problems fixed, as you've pointed out in your own experience as a technician. And if a resident doesn't believe the work order was adequately addressed, they should be able to keep the work order open until it's been completely addressed. Ms. Warner and then Ms. Christian, I want to turn back to you on the issue of families with disabilities. In both of your written testimonies, you highlighted the struggles that military families with disabilities experience when trying to request legally protected accommodations from Balfour Beatty. This includes requiring excessive documentation to prove the disability, making it extremely frustrating at best to request accommodations. What, if any, information does Balfour Beatty give to potential residents about the process to request legally protected accommodations for military family members with disabilities before they decide to live at a Balfour Beatty residence? Are you aware of any standardized process for requesting accommodations? And I'll start with you, Ms. Warner.
Currently, there are no standards that Balfour offers to families. They report to us often that they will ask for excessive things such as full-blown medical records.
Right.
And there is no even just a standard form that the medical provider can sign to state that the family has the need for ADA accommodations or special needs requests. There is a medical waiver that can move the families up on the wait list if they are waiting for an ADA home or just a one-level home, but they are discouraged from using that waiver.
Okay. How are they discouraged?
So I can tell you personally, our family is going through that process right now, and the regional manager assured us that if we sign that waiver, that every military family that has been waiting on a house in that neighborhood, if we moved ahead of them, they would come after us.
Wow. Ms. Christian, anything to add?
I would just like to add that we, as an organization, follow what the Fair Housing Act says and how families should provide medical documentation. Like there's no real way for them to do so, so we follow what federal law is. And even when providing medical documentation from physicians stating that there is a disability, what the accommodations requests are, those are still denied by local levels, and requesting more information, which is just a violation of their civil rights.
And it is really disturbing that a contractor for the United States military that is supposed to be there to serve the men and women who serve all of us and keep us safe and their families is not complying with long-standing federal law. And there are plenty of examples of how to meet the accommodation needs of families with disabilities. This is not new. This is often quite straightforward. And I would look forward to continuing to work with all of you to ensure that we make significant progress here and that one of our contractors follows the law of the land. Thank you.
Thank you, Senator Hassan. I'm going to yield myself an additional 7 minutes. Other senators may be en route to ask questions of this panel. Captain Cho, I want to return to your story for a moment. Take us back to the summer of 2020. As you testified earlier, you've been instructed by Balfour personnel that you should submit your requests for mold remediation not via the online work order system, but verbally or by the phone, correct?
That is correct.
And as you're making those requests of Balfour personnel throughout the summer of 2020 and your doctor's health condition continues to worsen, what response do you get?
No response.
No response. And am I correct that your doctor's physician shortly thereafter advised you needed to leave the home?
That is correct.
So you've been instructed by Balfour staff that you should place these requests verbally rather than via the online work order system. You've done so repeatedly. Your daughter is sick. You've seen mold in the home. You're getting no response. Your doctor tells you need to move out of the home, so you approach Balfour to break the lease. What happens then?
I asked Balfour if I would be given the opportunity to break our lease, or at least at the very minimum be provided another home to reside in, while they can at least mitigate the conditions of the current home that we were at. We were categorically denied both of those choices, and Balfour stated quite clearly that we would have to continue to honor the lease that was in place at that time.
So you've repeatedly reported mold and gotten no response. Your doctor has told you that you need to leave the home for the sake of your daughter's health. She has now a severe dermatological condition. You ask Balfour how to get out of the home. They tell you can't.
Yes. It culminated with I submitting something called a ICE comment, which throughout the DoD is considered a very serious comment system or feedback system where we can provide feedback regarding certain services, whether good or ill. And in this case, it was definitely not a positive feedback that I provided. I was contacted by a supervisor at Balfour, Gordon, Teddy Tripp was the gentleman's name, who told me that basically we would have to continue to reside in the home and that there were no other homes available and that there were essentially no other options available. I responded in kind by saying, when I was told personally, very specifically, by the Fort Gordon manager at the time, Samantha Dayer, February of 2020, when our home had the initial test for mold conducted, she handed me her business card and encouraged me to contact her verbally or coming by the office to seek her out. I adhered to that as strictly as I could, but in the interim, my wife and I submitted work orders, and whenever a technician would come over to take care of a leaky faucet, a broken cabinet door, whatever the case may be, we told them there's mold in our upstairs. There's mold in our room, or our daughter's room. There's also mold in the bathroom as well. It's present. We were told every single time that that mold would be addressed by the management and that the management would be in contact with us at some point in time. That never took place at any point in time.
So you raised these requests repeatedly with technicians who were sent to the home and by the phone with the office as you were instructed to by Balfour personnel. You get no response. You're told by your doctor you need to leave the home. You approach Balfour to say you need to leave the home. They try to prevent you from leaving the home, and they also accuse you of lying?
That is correct. Even the day before we officially moved out, my family had already relocated to an off-post home, but in January of 2021, I was at the move-out inspection, but the day before, there was a couple things that still needed to be addressed that hadn't been, so I made sure that a Balfour technician came out. That gentleman came out. He fixed the issues that were there. It was like a broken light bulb and something else. I ripped up the bathroom lining of the bathroom that our family had used. I even purposely chipped away at the paint in the wall and showed the blackened paint chips that the mold had proliferated in. And I stated very specifically, this is the mold that we have been complaining to you folks about for months on end. I asked that you notify your facilities manager, Tom Rodriguez, to have this addressed as soon as possible. Following that, my family and I had, or not my family, myself and my chain of command, we all had a discussion with Balfour Beatty as far as how can we come to a compromise. There is no compromise. Essentially, we need to get out of the home. We were seeking, we being my family and I, to either have our move funded by Balfour Beatty, and if not them, at least Steve Ford Gordon Garrison. Both channels denied our request to fund our move, which at that point we had to move off post. So while I am dealing with the Balfour Beatty representatives, as well as the Garrison representatives, to include the Garrison command team, to include the housing manager at that time, Jenna Holman, my wife is 7 months pregnant and is moving things on her own because none of these organizations will pay for our off-post move. So I'm not lacking as far as financials, but at the same time, it's the principle behind it. If our home is a source of my daughter's condition and we have been told succinctly that we need to move off-post, by all means, we will move off-post. But the principle behind it is Balfour Beatty should have at least provided some type of support, or the Garrison should have supplied some support.
So finally, with great effort, engaging the Garrison command, making repeated requests, you managed to get out of the home. You send an email to Paula Cook documenting your experience. You read a portion from that.
Yes.
Did you receive an apology from Ms. Cook in response to that email?
I have never received an apology from Balfour Beatty or any of the representatives at any point in time.
In fact, did you receive a collection notice?
That is correct.
Did they threaten to send a collection agency against you?
To add insult to injury, yes.
And when you challenged that, were you informed that it had been a mistake?
Yes, which I challenged that reasoning by saying, well, there was a considerable thought behind a collections notice being purposely sent to me stating the charges that were notated on the collection itself. If this was an internal error, this should have been caught prior to distribution to my home.
Thank you, Captain Cho. Senator Langford's arrived with just 1 minute remaining. Sergeant Torres, I want to make sure we dig in on one specific aspect of your case. So your wife suffers from respiratory condition, correct?
Yes.
And you have repeatedly asked Balfour to remediate the mold in your home. You're initially told there's no issue. Finally, you place urgent requests. They send an inspection company to inspect the home, correct?
Correct.
The inspection company finds that there's 175 square feet of area in your home that need to be remediated or replaced, correct?
Correct.
But at the same time, Balfour has hired a third-party company called Exponent that never looked at the home, and they attach Exponent's report to this mold inspection report telling you it's actually no big deal and remediating the mold is premature. Is that correct?
Correct.
But they go ahead and they remediate the mold. And here's the point that I think is important, and I'm going to ask that my team prepare to show slide 4. You placed these work orders upon returning to your home, and you reported mold, correct?
That is correct.
Those are your work orders. You describe mold on the floor behind hall bathroom and mold under the mech room. Is that correct?
That is correct.
All right, well, now I'm going to ask that slide 5 be depicted. Here at the bottom, we have the internal data from Balfour's Yardy system, which they use to maintain work orders, and they've classified your requests as carpentry. So you've placed 2 work orders for mold in the home. Those are filed internally as carpentry. You can close the slide. I want to ask you, Ms. Christian, what are we looking at there?
What you're looking at is what you'll see across the board at all of the Balfour Beatty installations. They are taking what is a hazard in a home and making it a simplified request so that when the 7-year maintenance history or when any of the information is provided to the next tenant, it's not going to be correct. Also, it's way easier to close out a carpentry request than it is to provide a full-scale mold remediation.
We'll get into that more with Balfour's representatives later. Thank you, Ms. Christian. Now yield 7 minutes to Senator Langford.
Thank you. Y'all, thanks for being here. I have a good feeling that none of you really want to be able to be here or to have to walk through all this and the frustration of it. So thanks for being here and for speaking out and for representing the voice of a lot of other folks through this process. I really do appreciate that. Mr. Christensen, I want to ask you a question that's been asked before on this, and I want to be able to do some follow-up on it. It is when the command leadership was taken out of the equation, they lost an advocate. The plan was there'd be other advocates that are there, but it's our understanding those advocates are not able to articulate that. Why? Why aren't they able to articulate the issues and get results?
So this varies from branch of service, the type of advocate you have in the installation and across the board. But I will say that none of them that we've come into contact with, which is a majority of military installations in the country, have training in housing. So they are not equipped to understand what an inspection should look like. For example, I'll give you in North Carolina, there are certifications for home inspection, but the person who is supposed to be your advocate is going to walk through your home and tell you whether or not something is awry in your home. And I have seen them miss gas leaks. I've seen them miss molds. I've seen them miss lead chipping. And they walk through a lot of the times with the housing company themselves. And they lean on, in this case, they lean on Balfour Beatty's assistance to understand what's actually going on in the home because they are not trained.
Okay, so what's the solution to that? Are you suggesting some sort of state certification before they can do that? Some sort of federal certification for that?
Absolutely, and industry standards. So they need to follow state laws. So someone who would be providing the same type of inspection at a other facility off of the installation, they need to be trained in understanding the state law, the fire codes, anything that you would need if you were to inspect a home off the installation.
Would you put that person under the authority of your commanders at that point to be able to have, again, where you've got somebody that they answer to for it, or who do they work for?
Personally, I would hope that we would have a true third party outside of the partnership, because this is not just a contractor. These are partnerships between the branch of service and the housing companies. So if you do report directly to them, they have an incentive to have their partnership functioning. They don't want that to fall. So it needs to be a true third party outside of that.
Okay. So Balfour in my state, Tinker Air Force Base, the largest of the sustainment facilities in the country, and then Altus Air Force Base. Altus was put into a grouping of multiple different entities, of which Tyndall was one of those. So with Tyndall being in that mix, and obviously Tyndall getting obliterated in a hurricane, all the focus seems to be going there. And there'll be lots of new construction in Tyndall, but because of that, and they're in a grouping of four, then they're not going to get the attention from Balfour at Altus. So Altus is suffering the consequences of a hurricane on the other side, literally, of the country of that because of the grouping that they're in. The local folks, of what I hear when I talk to individuals on base, or when we talk to leadership on it, they are very pleased with the turnaround that Balfour has had the last couple of years, because in 2018, Balfour at Tinker Air Force Base, all the mold, all the issues, non-responsive. At Altus, we still continue to be able to get Band-Aid fixes for things that should be replaced, or actually just constant Band-Aid fixes where they know that's going to work for a few months and then I'm going to be calling you again. So it's two big issues that are here. One is trying to be able to balance out how where there's a hurricane in one area, so every other base actually gets punished because of that, because all their focus is going to be somewhere else. Or how do you deal with the issue of Band-Aid fixes that actually get repaired so this isn't a nuisance for those families? You have ideas on either of those?
If you don't provide a Band-Aid fix and you provide the correct fix the first time, then you're not incurring the cost of continually going out and trying to Band-Aid fix these problems.
No, I get that totally. Who becomes the advocate to actually make sure it's not a Band-Aid fix, that this is actually something that gets actually repaired or replaced rather than just a patch on it? So somebody's got to be in that chain of command, obviously, or that somewhere there's got to be accountability for the resident to be able to say, I know that's not going to work. Everybody else knows that's not going to work. But they're saying, I fixed it and wrote it up and turned it in.
I believe that was the intent of having the government housing office on the installations to do that. But residents absolutely need an oversight tool that they can report directly to outside of the installation and outside of those employees.
Okay. I'm running out of time on this. I want to be able to honor time. Mr. Shores, I want to be able to ask you this as well. Excuse me, let me just go ahead and call you by your title, by Tech Sergeant.
Yes, sir.
Thanks, by the way. Let me go ahead and ask you on this. You've lived in other places that weren't under Balfour.
Correct.
What was it like? Compare it.
It was actually, we never had any issues. I've been stationed 2 other places and never once had any issues, especially where they know my background, they know what I do, that they've always, hey, we put a work order in, I will be there right away. They come out, fix it, never had any issues. My family never had any problems. I can be at work and I could be, I've deployed twice, 3 times, and I've never had to be worried. I'm an instructor, and every time we put a work order in, I'm having to be at the house because my wife is scared that, they're going to kind of blow her off because, they don't want to talk to the spouse. They just want to talk to the military person, and just because that if I say something wrong, they can just go ahead and tell my leadership, and then I get in trouble for it. When it shouldn't be that way. My wife is a stay-at-home mom, and she should be able to call a work order in, and they help her out as much as they can, not for me having to be there because my wife's scared of being there with a technician.
Yeah, totally get that. You should be respectful of that. By the way, she's a resident of the house as well, correct?
Correct.
Yeah, so why would it matter which resident of the house is actually calling that in? Kevin Clough, same issue. You've lived in other places, not with Balfour as the caretaker for the home. Can you compare the two?
My family, my father in particular, has told me quite clearly, if you have the opportunity or the choice to reside on post or off post, always choose off post. I had asked that before when I was younger and up until my military service commenced, and he gave me very sound reasoning. Unfortunately, this is the only time that we lived on post at an installation, and this will be the very last time that we live on post at any installation.
Yeah. Shouldn't be that way, and it's one of the issues that we face at Altus Air Force Base is that it's older housing that needs to be redone completely, but now we're on the bottom of the list because Tyndall is going to end up with all new, and they're just going to say that's going to get all new, and Altus and the other 3 bases that are in that group are just going to continue to be old and old and older, which doesn't meet what our folks need actually on that particular base. So thank you all for being here very much and for your service to the country.
Thank you, Senator Langford. Ranking Member Johnson.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I think part of the problem here is the housing that these contracting companies have taken over is extremely old, correct? Ms. Christensen, or not?
No, I don't believe that's the case. There are some that are older and they have different issues like lead and asbestos. But you can look at brand new homes and they are going to have the same systemic issues that other homes have, especially with the way that they're constructed. There's going to be leaks coming in, but no matter what, if you fix a leak, it will not cause problems if you remediate it correctly the first time. So no matter if they're new homes or old homes, failed maintenance is failed maintenance, and it's going to continue to occur.
So it sounds like Senator Carper, I don't want to put words in his mouth, but apparently at Dover Air Force Base, he believes the base commander is taking charge of this and is doing a pretty good job. I mean, it's never perfect. Are there some bases, are there some housing units that are in better shape than others where you don't have the kind of complaints? I mean, are there some real problem areas?
There's definitely larger problem areas, and there's also installations that are having a better time with certain things. Like, I can find you an installation that has better mold than others. You're still going to find mold there, even in the desert. So you're going to see it across the board. I wouldn't say that anybody is doing it a better way that I can bring to you. I would love to. I would love to say model everything after this installation, because then our organization wouldn't have to exist. We're a 100% volunteer-run organization that's handling a massive amount of clientele.
But you gave 2 examples of what the supposed fix in the NDA from a couple of years ago took leases from 10 pages to 100 and took it to a 48-step resolution process, or
correct.
Any other bureaucratic fixes like that?
There's a ton. So, I mean, those are 2 really great examples that you can visually see, but just the process in which you need to request any type of assistance is so lengthy that most families are giving up and their homes are going to continue to deteriorate.
So I'm the bean counter on this committee. So I kind of want to ask a couple bean counter questions because I haven't got the overall extent of this. I mean, to my knowledge, what I saw, it looks like Balfour B is paid roughly around $30 million a year for its housing management. Is that accurate?
I have no idea of any of those numbers. I would love to know what they are, but no, that's not something accessible to me.
Okay, so you wouldn't be able to tell me what is the total government contract amounts for managing this housing?
No, and I will tell you that we have tried to get a lot of that information through Freedom of Information Act requests, but it's claimed as proprietary, so we get a lot of blacked out documents.
I run the same problem when I try and do legitimate oversight, so I feel your pain on that. You did mention, this was a comment, that this is profits over people. Do you know what the profitability level is?
I don't know what the profitability is, but I will tell you that it has to be good enough because they keep coming back to the Senate to hear it, and they haven't tried to get away with anything else. Okay, well,
I'll obviously be exploring that with the folks here from Balfour. One of the reasons I asked the question is, if my information is correct and Balfour is getting about $30 million a year, they paid a $65 million fine, I'd kind of scratch my head and go, why even be in that business? How many other contractors like Balfour are there?
There are 14 housing.
14. How many? Generally, you've got an 80-20 rule. 80% of the work is done by about 20%. Are there top 5 or so?
Yes, there's Balfour Beatty, Liberty Military Housing, Corvius, Hunt, and for some reason I can't think of a.
Does your group find any difference in terms of the level of management of any of those companies? I mean, are there some companies that are just heads and tails above the others?
No, I mean, if you took Balfour Beatty out of any of the statements that anybody at this table wrote, you can interchange them with any of the other companies. And I will say that the smaller companies who have not gotten the attention that the other ones have are absolutely horrific for residents to live in. They are the worst.
So you know, if I'm a base commander and I had the power to, you know, use the free market system and say, you're not performing, I'm going to fire you, I'm going to hire somebody else. It doesn't seem like there's anybody else to hire that would do a better job.
I don't agree with that necessarily. I think that the fact that there is not that ability is the reason that this is occurring.
Well, I understand. No, but again, right now there is not that ability, correct? That's the point I'm trying to make. So I'm trying to drill down on what is the root cause of this. Why does this continue? Again, in a free market, there should be, and I come from the free market system. I compete against excellence. And excellence means really high quality, high levels of customer service at the best possible price. I mean, that's what a free market guarantees. Something's broken down here, okay? And my guess is bureaucratic fixes that just simply don't work. You know, bureaucratic mindset, it's not my problem. We're going to pass this bill and we're going to say we're going to turn it over here, kind of walk away. And the bureaucracy creates fixes like, you know, a 100-page lease, a 48-step resolution process, you know, finger pointing, the big runaround, and nothing gets fixed. So I'm trying to hone in on what is the root cause here and how can it actually be fixed. My guess is, you know, I'd be looking for a free market solution, and I'd fire these people, okay? But you've got to have somebody to replace it. And that's one of the reasons I'm talking about profitability. I mean, is there enough incentive for good companies to come in here and do the kind of job that we would all expect? Again, I recognize you can't really answer that question.
I would hope that there is, but I would also like to say that, like you're saying, like you're competing in a market off the installation. You're competing in a market where I am paying rent to you, and if you're not doing a good job, you don't receive my rent. That's not the case for these housing companies. They're still, and that was something that 3 years ago they requested, was for service members to not be able to just have that allotted. And that's a big oversight.
It also sounds like there's relationships between people on the base, members of the military, and people working for these companies. Is that a common problem? Or?
Absolutely. That is an absolute problem, because if you're going to someone and you have a personal relationship with them, they're not going to want to get them in trouble.
So again, I have no doubt that Armed Services Committee tried to fix this a couple of years ago. I think the result of our investigation, the result of this hearing is didn't work. We better figure out something better to do. But anyway, I appreciate your testimony, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Ranking Member Johnson. This concludes the testimony from our first panel. I want to thank you all so sincerely for your presence, for sharing your experiences and information with us. In particular, want to commend these two extraordinary active duty service members, one of whom flew from South Korea, one from Texas, to join us and get on the record your experiences. And with gratitude, this panel is dismissed, and we'll now prepare to hear from our second panel. Thank you. We will now call our second panel of witnesses for this morning's hearing. Mr. Richard Taylor is the President of Facility Operations, Renovations, and Construction at Balfour Beatty Communities, with overall responsibility for Balfour's military housing facility management activities, including preventative maintenance, repairs, and quality assurance. He has worked for the firm and its predecessors for 19 years and worked in the industry for nearly 3 decades. He also previously served in the U.S. Navy for more than 12 years. Ms. Paula Cook just transitioned to Vice President for Transformation at Balfour, responsible for leading the company's, quote, new culture-shaping initiatives. Up until last week, she served as Vice President of Community Management, in charge of Balfour's Army portfolio of military housing properties, and she has been with the company since 2007. Ms. Cook is also a U.S. Navy veteran. I appreciate both of you for joining us today. We look forward to your testimony. It's the custom of this subcommittee to swear in all witnesses, so at this time I would ask you to please stand and raise your right hand. Do you swear the testimony you will give before this subcommittee will be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth, so help you God?
Yes, I do.
Let the record reflect that the witnesses answered in the affirmative. We will be using a timing system today. Ms. Cook and Mr. Taylor, you submitted joint written testimony, and it will be printed in the record in its entirety. I understand that Mr. Taylor will provide oral testimony on behalf of both witnesses. Mr. Taylor, please kindly limit your remarks to 5 minutes. You may proceed.
Chairman Ossoff, Ranking Member Johnson, members of the subcommittee, thank you for the opportunity to provide an update on the commitment of Balfour Beatty Communities to support the safety, health, and well-being of the service members and their families across the 55 military installations we serve, including Fort Gordon, Fort Stewart, and Shepherd Air Force Base. I am accompanied by Paul.
Forgive me, Mr. Taylor. Would you just ensure your microphone is active?
Is that better?
That is. Thank you. Would you mind beginning at the beginning?
Not at all.
Thank you.
Chairman Ossoff, Ranking Member Johnson, members of the subcommittee, thank you for the opportunity to provide an update on the commitment of Balfour Beatty Communities to support the safety, health, and well-being of the service members and their families across the 55 military installations we serve, including Fort Gordon, Fort Stewart, and Shepherd Air Force Base. I'm accompanied by Paula Cook, who leads the ongoing transformation efforts for our community management operations. At BBC, we consider it an honor and a privilege to serve those who serve our country. In fact, both Paula and I are Navy veterans ourselves. Therefore, we have a special appreciation for our military housing roles at Balfour Beatty. In 2019, I made a commitment in congressional testimony to improve BBC's ability to monitor repairs and respond to problems, to prioritize the health and safety of residents, and to prepare homes for residents before they move into one of our homes. I'm proud to say that we have made enormous strides since I made that commitment. Today, we're responsible for housing operations encompassing more than 43,000 homes and approximately 150,000 residents. We have partnered with the DoD to oversee the construction of more than 15,000 new military homes and the renovation of more than 14,000 legacy homes. Since the start of the MHPI, BBC and our service branch partners have developed project investments totaling approximately $5.6 billion to improve on-base housing. Through our military housing agreements, we act in joint partnership and are required to coordinate with all of our DoD partners on all aspects of the leasing, maintenance, renovation, and development of our housing. Our primary focus is providing our residents with safe, quality homes supported by prompt and effective customer service and maintenance support. We look to support these efforts by maintaining robust, open communications with our residents. Our resident portals allow the residents to view their work order history as well as access community policies, household maintenance, and safety tips. In addition, our new national call center is staffed and available 24/7 to initiate a work order, schedule maintenance, and provide updates. I want to emphasize that we are committed to maintaining accurate work order data. We do not tolerate anyone at BBC falsifying work order information. Both BBC and the government's local military housing offices have multiple checkpoints with new residents before, during, and after move-in to identify issues or questions regarding the home. We supplement this personal outreach with our own resident surveys. These surveys are conducted by an independent third party and are sent to residents after move-in and after responding to a work order. Like with any customer service business, we recognize that, unfortunately, we will never be able to make every resident happy. But nevertheless, we remain resolute in that pursuit. In 2021, we received just over 40,000 survey responses, resulting in an average service score of 4.53 out of 5. For the period January 1st of 2021 through last week, the average work order score at Fort Gordon in particular was 4.62. With over a third of our military housing stock consisting of aging units constructed by the military, we will never have homes that present zero maintenance issues. On average, we receive and process more than 280,000 resident-generated work orders annually. Like with any residential housing property, there will always be challenges to face. Appliances will break, utility, plumbing, and electrical systems will fail, severe weather will cause damage, pest issues will arise, and customer service complaints will surface. I also want to emphasize that our teams have faced tremendous challenges since the pandemic hit in 2020. We are not alone in experiencing supply chain challenges, home access issues, staffing issues due to the pandemic. However, our obligation is to respond and manage repairs and service in as timely and effective a manner as possible. We have embraced and voluntarily implemented the following measures in support of our residents. We agreed to a new DoD-sponsored universal lease, which includes the Tenant Bill of Rights. We instituted a formal dispute resolution process, and we now provide 7-year maintenance histories for our homes. In addition, enhanced DoD monitoring of housing has created another check and balance to ensure our housing is safe for occupancy, such as through government housing inspections before any home may be offered. Our performance metrics indicate the overwhelming majority of our residents are happy with their home and the service we provide. Regardless, we are never satisfied where even small numbers of our residents report dissatisfaction. We remain dedicated to working with the residents, the military housing advocacy groups, and the DoD to address housing challenges. We look forward to learning from the subcommittee how we may further improve our performance and enhance the quality of life for our residents. Again, we appreciate the opportunity to continue serving our nation's military and to testify regarding our commitment to those efforts. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Taylor and Ms. Cook. And Ms. Cook, I understand Mr. Taylor's offering those oral remarks on both of your behalfs. I'll begin now with my questions. In the course of this investigation, my and Ranking Member Johnson's teams and we have reviewed tens of thousands of pages of records, interviewed dozens of witnesses. Most of that investigation focused on 2019, 2020, 2021, or the period principally after Balfour's guilty plea. In order to understand which forms of misconduct or mismanagement may be persisting following that resolution of the Department of Justice. But before we get into that, I want to just, Mr. Taylor, make sure we're clear on the facts related to that Department of Justice matter. It is the case, is it not, and my time's limited, so I want to make sure that we cover this as concisely as we can, that from 2013 to 2019, your company engaged in a scheme to defraud the United States, correct?
The record indicate, or the
is that correct that you engaged in a scheme to defraud the United States?
That, Senator, the settlement agreement acknowledges that. Yes, sir.
Okay. So from 2013 to 2019, your company engaged in a scheme to defraud the United States. I suppose the first question is, why should a company convicted of major criminal fraud that engaged in a scheme to defraud the United States remain in a position of trust responsible for the safe housing of the hero service members and their families on installations across the country?
I'd like to answer that by putting it a little bit into context. As you indicated, Senator, the period in which the behavior took place was from the period 2013 to 2019. When we were alerted to the allegations that there was improper behavior amongst some of our employees, we immediately cooperated along the way with the DOJ investigators. We engaged our own third-party legal firm and forensic accountants to understand the root causes. We provided all of that information in collaboration with the DOJ as that investigation was ongoing. We did an analysis to understand what the root causes were. We didn't wait for the outcome of that investigation and the settlement that was reached in late of last year to act upon the things that we identified were shortcomings within our own business. So we took quick action to
and we're going to get, Mr. Taylor, forgive me, but my time's limited. We're going to get into the actions that you've taken and whether or not those actions have had good effect. Let's talk about what constituted this 6-year scheme to defraud the United States to which Balfour pled guilty. Am I correct that this scheme to defraud the United States included the falsification and destruction of work order records? Yes or no?
It did.
Am I correct that this scheme to defraud the United States included lying to the armed services? Yes or no?
Lying, not, you say lying. We put forward.
Well, I'm sorry, I've got here, this is paragraph 24 of a statement of facts. Balfour Beatty made false representations to all 3 service branches.
We put forward false incentive fee submissions that didn't reflect the performance metrics at certain locations.
Am I correct that this scheme to defraud the United States, which included the falsification and destruction of maintenance record, also included prematurely closing work orders in order to present to the military superior performance to what was happening in reality in order to secure incentive payments?
That's a fair statement, yes, sir.
And it is your position, Mr. Taylor, that despite engaging in this 6-year scheme to defraud the United States, major criminal fraud, that your company should remain in a position of trust housing America's military families? Yes or no?
Yes, I do.
That is your position. Okay, I want for a moment, please, Ms. Cook, and we'll return to some of the latest events, Mr. Taylor, but ask you, Ms. Cook, about your experience in your position. And I want to begin by asking you to review for the subcommittee correspondence that you received from service members who were housed at Fort Gordon after the period during which Balfour was engaged in a scheme to defraud the United States, the period during which Balfour assured the Department of Justice, the Department of Defense, and the U.S. Congress that it was improving its practices. If you would, Ms. Cook, please turn to tab 10. You'll see at the bottom, Ms. Cook, customer comments. This is an email that you received from a tenant in your housing. The email is dated September of 2020. Would you please read, beginning with customer comments and on to the next page? It's not a long email.
Need to get that. It's on, okay. Yes, I recently retired after 21 years of combined service. This is by far the worst housing I have ever lived in. We had mold in our house, under the vinyl floors, in the walls, behind our cabinets, and in the vents. Our roof leaked and the sheetrock fell in the closet. I was in the MEB process and the sewer line collapsed and we had to move. They gave me 1 week to vacate a house that was not fit for occupancy so they could work on it. I was forced to move from one house to another while physically disabled, then In the 6 months that we remained there, they did no work on the house. The company is unprofessional and should be removed from the installation. They have no clue what it means to run a safe and organized military housing community. The installation leadership needs to do a walkthrough of housing and talk to every resident. I know of several people that have multiple issues with their homes, and nothing seems to be getting accomplished. Since I'm no longer in the military, I do not fear retaliation from the housing office. If I had to do it all over again, I would not live on base and would have found a home that was better suited for my family. Customer has requested a response from management.
Thank you, Ms. Cook. And this is one of many emails that you received that we reviewed. Here are some quotes from others. Urine stains were found in 3 of the 4 bedrooms. Bathroom floorboards were forming bubbles with water in them. Mold was growing on carpet. We risk health issues for my 19-month-old baby. Death trap of a house. I have a pregnant wife who is high risk and I have to live with this. Exposed mold on my ceiling. We continuously get provided little to no response. Water leaks into kitchen light cover. Nothing has been done. That's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11 emails that you received all after the period during which Balfour was engaged in a scheme to defraud the United States. I want to ask you, Mr. Taylor, given that your company engaged in major criminal fraud, why should we believe your assurances? We've heard from Captain Cho. We've heard from Sergeant Torres. They've both told us their horror stories. We've heard from advocates who have described these issues as systemic and ongoing. We just went through 12 or 13 emails Ms. Cook received. My office interviewed dozens of others who reported significant issues with work orders being misclassified, ongoing concerns about contamination, ceilings falling in. Why should we believe, Mr. Taylor, that a company been engaged in major fraud against the United States is fixing this?
Well, first off, Senator, I reject the suggestion that it's a systemic failure. You cited, in the case that you just read, 12 emails, 11 emails. As I shared with you, we're a company that processes 280,000 on average emails annually. Things go wrong. We don't always get it right the first time. We're not perfect. We've never testified that we are a perfect organization that gets it right 100% the first time. What's important for us is that we understand where our shortcomings are and we take action to correct those deficiencies.
Mr. Taylor, my time is limited. My question is very specific. It's why should we believe your assurances when your company engaged in a 6-year-long scheme to defraud the United States? Why should we believe your assurances? That is my question.
Take a look at the actions that we've taken subsequent to that period in time. We've shared that information with your staff during interviews, some of that information. We've shared that information. We've been very transparent with the service branches, OSD. We've been transparent with the HASC and SAS staffers on the journey that we've been on to transform our business. And the results that we're seeing are demonstrating that we are have taken this very seriously, and we're taking very proactive steps to ensure that we don't repeat the mistakes of the individuals in our firm that worked here at the time that was engaged.
Thank you, Mr. Taylor. We will get into some of those specific steps you've taken in a moment. My time has expired. I yield to Ranking Member Johnson.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Taylor, I just want to find out a little bit more about Balfour. Your division of Balfour Beatty PLC, correct?
That's correct.
Headquartered out of London?
That's correct.
A little more than £8 billion business?
I believe that's...
So how big a division is yours?
In terms of that volume of business, our business is we're part of an investments division. The value that is promulgated by the company is largely around our construction and services business. The investments business does not comprise part of that revenue, if you will. Revenue is looked at differently in the construction-related business than it is in our investments business, to include our military housing, which is a subsidiary.
So are you associated with the construction part of your division, or simply the facility management?
So there is Balfour Beatty Investments is a division of Balfour Beatty PLC. Balfour Beatty Communities is a subsidiary of Balfour Beatty Investments. So it's a third-tier organization within the structure, if you will, that exists to provide housing to our service members and their families, and we do other apartment-type communities, student housing around the country under that banner of Balfour Beatty Communities.
So Ms. Christensen, or Ms. Christian, talked about that this is profit over people, pure and simple. Do you have a response to that?
I absolutely have a response to that. I think that is an unfair characterization. We work tirelessly. We've got approximately 1,400 employees that work up, about a third of whom, by the way, are like Ms. Cook and myself, former military, retirees. We employ a number of spouses that also choose to live with us. We have folks that get up every day with a singular commitment to provide for the health and safety of our military residents. So I think that's an unfair characterization. Again, I'll go back to, do our people make mistakes? Yes, they make mistakes. There's human error in every business. But to suggest that the error rate is indicative of widespread broken business is totally unfair.
So in my briefing materials, I saw something like $30 million a year generated for this division. To me, that seemed just woefully low. Is that an accurate number, or is there a different number?
Well, it's the deal that we struck when we closed on the projects. That $30 million roughly is about the average over the last 3 years for the receipt of the property management fees across our 55 military installations, 43,000 housing units. To put it into context, that equates to about $700 per unit per year on a pre-tax basis, and it doesn't net off the cost of running the business.
But that is just a small percentage of your division, correct?
No, sir. That is
your division.
That is the most significant revenue stream for our.
Okay, so you got $30 million. So when you pay a $65 million fine, that wipes out more than 2 years worth of revenue, not just profit, but revenue. And that $30 million a year division that employs 1,400 people.
Approximately 1,400, yes, sir.
Do you also subcontract out to contractors?
We do.
So what percent do you perform with those 1,400 people versus? Again, that's 1,400 people looking at about 43,000 units.
Yes, sir. Yeah, there's a lot of third-party support, and it varies jurisdictionally. You know, if we're in a market where there's limited availability of third-party vendors, then we'll have a heavier staff than we would. But generally speaking, we could have anywhere from 10 to 12 vendors on a third-party service agreement that assists us with the performance of our work.
Do you evaluate your vendors? I mean, if they don't perform, do you terminate their contracts and hire others?
Absolutely.
How often do you do that?
We have the standard termination clauses that are in contracts that you find in any contracting arrangement.
So, again, you manage 43,000 housing units. What is the total inventory of housing units for the military? Do you know?
I think it's about 300,000, might be a little under 280,000. OSD can give you that.
So you're more than 10%.
Yes, sir.
Are you the largest manager of housing units, or are there other people that are as big or larger?
I believe there's one provider that manages more units than we do.
Okay. How do you explain the testimony you heard from Captain Cho, Sergeant Torres, Ms. Warner?
I think it's their perception of what transpired. I think that we've got a different perception. I think that.
Okay, can you give us a different perspective, for example, with Captain Cho's daughter?
Well, first, I mean, you know, as a father of a son and daughter myself, I have empathy, you know, substantial empathy for the Cho family. I know that's not hard to deal with any animal, with any child. I have a hard time drawing the conclusion that's been drawn on the first panel, that there's a direct correlation between the condition of the home and his daughter's medical condition.
Okay, I guess, you know, that's a legitimate point to make. Sometimes very difficult to prove causation on things. But do you deny the fact that the issues of mold just weren't addressed over a relatively long period of time?
I do deny that, yes, sir. And when in advance of this, having known that Captain Cho was going to testify, again, I wasn't involved in the details, but I took time to kind of understand a bit more about the situation because I wanted to be responsive to the subcommittee. In the time that the Cho family lived with us, they submitted 28 work orders, 22 of which were online, and Captain Cho acknowledged that was, he used that predominantly to let us know that work was being requested. The one work order that was put in late February of 2020 was inspected twice by our staff, was jointly inspected by our military housing partner, and found no evidence of mold at that time. Subsequent to that, there were 11 additional work orders that were put in online by Captain Cho, clearly indicating his intent to continue to notify us through the online portal to notify us of those issues. And I think, importantly for me, I think it's clear demonstration that Captain Cho had access to the portal, which also doesn't give him just the ability to input work orders, but it gives you can see any open work orders and what the status is of those work orders. So I guess my perspective, having heard what I heard a little bit ago, is if you didn't think that we were responding to the work orders by engaging in the resident portal, it should have been clear that no work order was being looked at in our system. To my knowledge, we've not been notified of that. To my knowledge, we've never seen any photographic evidence of any mold existing with the home. To my knowledge, the medical doctor's letter that suggested that the home might be the cause of her skin conditions and or the school, to my knowledge, that doctor never visited the home personally to view the condition in the home. To my knowledge, that letter was written in late June of 2020 and was provided to our site team in October of that year, about a 4-month delay. So when I kind of look at the fact pattern, I think that there's just holes. And so I think that, it's hard for me to reconcile in my mind that the home was actually the cause of the condition when the findings that we had in responding to the work request didn't indicate the same.
Mr. Chairman, would you give me time to see how Ms. Cook responds to that? Same question, Ms. Cook. Do you have any explanation?
Could you repeat the explanation on the mold? Is that what you're...
Well, just in terms of the situation with Captain Cho and his daughter.
Yeah.
You listen to their testimony. I mean, do you just refute it?
It's heartbreaking. I am a grandmother. I'm a mother. I care deeply about our residents, as all of our team does. I will say that we did go inspect that home. I personally did not, but our team is trained, as well as our Garrison Housing Office is trained. And I do feel that if there was a life, health, safety issue, that we would have immediately removed that family so that we could remediate. Okay. There was no signs of life, health, safety. If it's behind the walls, I cannot see that, no, sir. But I do feel that we did follow all EPA and CDC guidelines in that home as well as all of our homes.
Okay, well, thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you. Senator Scott.
Sure. Thank you, Chairman. Thank you, Ranking Member. Thank you for being here. So I was governor of Florida. I served the Navy, and I did at that time there was no public any housing for us, but I think it's well acknowledged we've got to do whatever we can to provide our men and women the best facilities, the best care we can. So I want to sort of follow up what Senator Johnson was talking about, but first I wanted to just ask something specific. And by the way, when I was governor, I did base commander meetings about every 4 months and just try to find their problems. And because it was a federal issue, I never dealt with that. But since I've been in the Senate, I've been up here a little over 3 years. A lot of people have complained. So I just want to go through one specific one. So I've received reports of unacceptable housing conditions at the Naval Air Station Key West. I don't know if you're familiar with this. It's the Sigsbee Park Annex. It says most of the units require significant improvements so that enlisted personnel and their families can have safe housing. So do you know what efforts have been made to ensure that our service members in Key West are living in acceptable housing conditions, and what your plans are to improve them? Is that something you're familiar with or not?
I am, Senator. As a matter of fact, I think it was approximately 2 weeks ago I was at Key West visiting with our team on that site. I think you're well aware, Key West has the overwhelming majority of what we have there is legacy housing. We constructed 111 new units during the initial development period. That project is part of an 11-base multi-site project called the Navy Southeast project. We've invested heavily in renovation of Sigsbee in particular. We've done bump outs, we've done kitchen improvements, we've done a lot of significant changes in there. We haven't been able to touch them all because of the financial constraints, I can tell you. We've had some issues with HVAC, duct sweating just because of the conditions in those homes. We've had some issues with lack of quality insulation because of the time in which those units were constructed. They're being addressed through this renovation plan. The Navy Southeast project in particular, is financially stressed. The BH increases haven't materialized over the time period that were expected. Insurance and utility rates have far outpaced, rates of inflation. I'll give you an example for all of the Navy Southeast project. This year, after we set our budgets, I think it was in March of this year, March or it might have been April, the local utility or the utility that manages or provides the utilities for Key West and all the Navy Southeast told us that there's going to be a 30% increase in utility costs this year when we budgeted for 3%. So those are the sorts of things those are the sorts of challenges that I think don't get talked about enough in this type of forum, because those are the real challenges that we ought to be engaging in. Again, I'll go back. Do we make mistakes occasionally? Yes. But if we want to look out for the long-term health and viability of this program that can serve the needs and interests of our service members and their families, we ought to be having the conversation about the financial viability of the projects.
Okay, can we go through, and it's somewhat Johnson's question. So how long have you been at the company?
22 years, sir.
Okay. So did you do the contract? Did you enter into the contract?
I led the business development team that pursued that project.
What are the economics? So how's it work? So are you getting paid a fee per home? Are you getting paid? Did you pay for all the existing housing and then you're responsible for it? How's it work?
Yeah. So in this case, with the Navy projects, very similar to the Army projects, the private partners. In this case, I'll talk about our company. We made an equity contribution, an equity investment in the project. That equity investment, typically for most projects, I don't recall specifically for Navy Southeast, generally between 1% and 5%. The Navy always wanted less equity in the projects than the other branches. The Navy would make a financial investment that they took out of then-year appropriations, and then what we would do is we would underwrite the potential revenue from the basic allowance for housing that we receive throughout the project. We would then take that revenue, BH as the top-line revenue, net out projected operating expenses, get to a net operating income line. We would then go to the financial markets. Based upon that net operating income, we could raise, in most cases, hundreds of millions of dollars that would be deployed during that initial development period to do replacement housing, renovations, all of those sorts of things. So that's how the project.
You basically borrowed against future revenues.
Correct.
Okay. And so the assumptions when you got into the contract, well, how have those assumptions been wrong?
The basic allowance for housing, again, is the only source of revenue for these projects. BAH is reset annually. It's supposed to be indicative of the cost increases in the local market, because the BH isn't just specific for the MHPI.
No, I got it paid.
More importantly, it's there's 70% folks that are living off.
I hear how bad it was. I got $124 a month. My apartment cost $250.
So BH has been highly unpredictable. We originally underwrote 2 to 3% annual increase. If you look at BH across the entirety of the DoD spectrum, it looks more like an EKG chart.
Okay. So your expectation when you bid for the contract is 2+% a year. That didn't happen.
That's
number one. Okay. So have you lost money on, let's take whichever project, to Navy Southeast. Have you lost money on that project?
We've not lost money. It's just the only, we get paid management fees as a percentage of income. So if income doesn't go up, our fees don't go up. But
How do you make money? Just on the management fees?
management fees for the property management. We also get a return on that equity investment I talked about that we made it at the front end. And that's at the very bottom of the cash flow.
That's a separate, so you have a management fee over here, and you have another company that was set up that took the risk on the construction, and is that the way it's set up?
The company made an equity investment in the project to help fund that initial development period work. That the return on that equity, just like any investor in a real estate project would get, you get after all of the bills are paid, the mortgage is paid, then the way
It's
that
leverage to the hilt. If they only wanted 1 or 1.5% equity, then it's just complete leverage, right?
significantly, yes.
And why did the Navy want that?
Because we could tap into private sector capital.
But the markets were,
didn't encumber
market,
the federal,
interest rates were so low, you could get.
and it didn't encumber the federal budget.
So then what happened? Now, did anybody change the deal? So they made assumptions. Their assumptions were wrong. Did the Department of Defense change the deal ever?
No.
So it's just that the assumptions were wrong. Have they made? Is it okay if I just finish? So have they made money as the equity side where they bought the property and responsible for the fixing it up? Has that been a money loser?
For our company? Mm-hmm. No, it's not a loser, but again, if revenues don't grow at the pace that you expected, you're falling short of what you expected.
Yeah.
But
so the equity holders didn't make the return.
It's still not a losing position.
All right. So the management fee is not the problem. Other than it seems like it's when Senator Johnson asked you a question, the management fee per unit seems pretty low. I mean, I've never done a deal like that, but that seems low
Relative to what private sector companies do, it is low.
Yeah. But you bid it, so you're responsible.
We got into this business because of, as I said, I served in the Navy myself. This business is attracted to me and always has been, and the reason that I work as tirelessly as I personally do is because I believe in the construct. I believe that it's a heck of a lot better way to provide housing to our service members and families than what we were capable of doing when I was in uniform. Light years of difference.
So what would you do in hindsight? What should either you or the government have done differently to make sure there's less of a risk that you have rogue employees that do the wrong thing?
In our case, had better internal controls.
Mm-hmm. Is there anything the government should have done differently?
Well, I think that there was certainly engagement from our military partners along the way. The FY 2020 NDA has really helped stoke the fire there, and I can tell you that we're working more closely with our military partners than we've ever worked, and I think that that's what the program ultimately needed.
So you don't think the structure of the entity caused the problem? You think it was a lack of oversight?
Yeah, okay. I think it's fair.
All right, thanks.
Thank you, Senator Scott. Mr. Taylor, I want to return to the question of whether indeed Balfour has reformed, improved its practices since 2019. Again, the period of 2013 to 2019 is the period during which the company was, as you've acknowledged, engaged in a scheme to defraud the United States. You made note in your opening remarks of satisfaction surveys that you've undertaken. Is that, in your view, an indicator of improved performance, or what does that signify in your opinion?
It's just one KPI that we pay close attention to because it's direct feedback that comes from our residents through an independent third party. Anytime, as I said, all service members are invited to participate when they move into their new home or their home. Once they take occupancy, they're invited to participate in the survey anytime we're in their home to provide responsible work order. So it's an indicator. It's not the end-all, be-all, but it's a pretty good indicator, and we track that and see how it trends over time so that we can take action where we see things are trending in the wrong direction. to investigate, why are our scores dropping? What is it about that we need to be paying attention to correct?
Yeah, but the reason that I'm skeptical of the satisfaction scores as an indication that you've improved your performance, and this is something that you and your team also raised in interviews before this hearing with the subcommittee staff. If we could have a look, please, at slide 16. Here we have your prepared testimony today at left. We have your predecessor in this role's prepared testimony from February of 2019 at right, testifying before the Senate. Now, just to make sure we have these dates correct, I want us to just clarify that February 2019, when your predecessor made these comments to the Senate, that was still during the period when the company was engaged in a scheme to defraud the United States. Is that correct?
The February 2019, that was still, yes,
Yes?
part of the period, yes.
Okay. So here we have your predecessor touting satisfaction scores in sworn testimony before the Senate during a period when the company is engaged in a fraud scheme, falsifying, destroying work orders, lying to the armed services, and the company is touting its satisfaction scores. And then at left here, we have, once again, from your written statements today, the satisfaction scores as an indicator of your company's improvement in performance. Now, 1 to 5 or very good to outstanding, these may not be apples to apples comparisons, but it gets back to the core question. We can close the slide, which is, why should the Senate believe that a company that for 6 years defrauded the government? And I got to say, I'm shocked, Mr. Taylor, that you deny these issues are systemic. They are clearly systemic. In fact, your performance as a company at installations in my state is notorious. Local media have reported on it for years and years and years. Every time I visit an installation, enlisted personnel raise it without me even prompting them to. We've convened entire discussions with enlisted personnel to figure out what's going on. That's why we embarked upon an 8-month-long investigation to understand what's happening. I'm just not sure that you understand what's happening within your own organization. I mean, did your senior executives know that for 6 years the company was engaging in fraud?
No.
So would you know now if your company was continuing to engage in fraud?
Yes.
You would. I'd like to explore just whether or not your management team has the situational awareness to understand what's happening inside your own firm. If we could please turn to tab 13. And while you do that, Mr. Taylor, if you could please tell the subcommittee who is Mr. Thomas Rodriguez and how was he related to you in the organization? Excuse me, tab 12, forgive me. And while you turn to tab 12, please, Mr. Taylor, who is Thomas Rodriguez?
He's a former employee and former facility manager at Fort Gordon.
Okay, he was the facility manager at Fort Gordon in Georgia.
And prior to that, he was a facility, he was a maintenance supervisor at Fort Stewart.
Understood, thank you. So here we have an email from Mr. Rodriguez. So as the facility manager at Fort Gordon, am I correct that perhaps not your direct subordinate, but he's your subordinate, correct?
He's in my chain of command, yes, sir.
That's right. And this email is from February of 2021. So this is 2 years after the conclusion of the period during which Balfour was engaged in this acknowledged scheme to defraud the United States. 2 years later, here's an email from Mr. Rodriguez, your subordinate. I'm not sure you received this email, Mr. Taylor, but you did, Ms. Cook. It was forwarded to you, in which Mr. Rodriguez says that the state of the facilities department at Fort Gordon is, quote, total chaos. He says, quote, words could not describe the total chaos, end quote. He further states that the facilities department at Fort Gordon has been lying to the Army about the condition of the facilities department at Fort Gordon. He says, quote, "This is not acting honestly or respecting our third parties," meaning the Army, "and treating them with integrity and professionalism," end quote. Ms. Cook, you received this email in February of 2021, is that correct?
Yes, I did.
And what action did you take when you received this email reporting that there was total chaos in the facilities department at Fort Gordon, and that, and again, this is from the head of the facilities department at Fort Gordon, and that the facilities department was being dishonest with the Army? What action did you take?
I do not totally recall without reviewing the records, but I do believe I did forward this to up my chain of command.
Okay, did you follow up after forwarding it to see what action was taken?
I believe we had a couple, because it was regarding the FM buildings. It was regarding the facility building, and I do believe I did.
So you followed up. Mr. Taylor, were you aware of this email at the time?
I was not.
You were not aware. So you understand the skepticism. Let's just, again, set the stage here. It's been 2 years since the end of a 6-year period when the company is engaged in a scheme to defraud the United States. At this very moment, February 2021, you're under Department of Justice investigation for being dishonest with the military, for fabricating and destroying work orders. You know you're under investigation. You know you're in hot water. And your subordinate reports that the facilities department at Fort Gordon is in total chaos, and that with respect to the condition of the facility department and its premises, there's a lack of integrity with the Army, and you weren't aware of this, Mr. Taylor. You say that the senior executives at Balfour didn't know that there was fraud ongoing for 6 years, but that you would know if there was fraud ongoing now. How sure are you, Mr. Taylor, that you would know if that misconduct continued to this day? Are you sure?
Well, I think that your interpretation of this email, what you just described, doesn't align with the question that you're asking me.
Okay, well, let me restate the question then, just for clarity. Here we have your subordinate reporting that when he took over the facilities department at Fort Gordon, it was in a state of total chaos, and that the facilities department has been dishonest with the Army, correct?
Where does it say that? Where does it say that?
We got the document here. That's what it says. It says, "When I arrived on site, words could not describe the total chaos that was the facilities department at Fort Gordon." You were not aware of this report, correct?
I was not aware of this email.
Okay. My time's expired. Ranking Member Johnson.
So can you step through, after the settlement a couple of years ago, what specific actions did you take to correct the deficiencies in your process? I mean, specifically, what did you do?
Yeah, Senator, there were many, and as we were working through them, I'll share that we were sharing those remediation plans with DOJ investigators as they were conducting their plan. We were sharing those remediation steps with our military partners. We were sharing that with HASC and SAF staffers that have oversight of this particular program. But there are a number of things, and I'll follow up with a more fulsome response, but I'll just share with you some of the things that we did. If you look at, one of the root causes for the falsification of work order data was the system that we use. The database that we use is a product called Yardi. At the time, there was too much opportunity for those that use the system to manipulate data. So we worked with that provider.
By the way, were they on bonus plans so that manipulating data was to their individual benefit? So in other words, if you had in your 1,400 employees, you have managers, did they get bonuses based on what their performance was off the Yardi system?
The statistics, there was a portion of their bonuses that came out in the investigation that their compensation was tied to performance. That's correct.
So is that still the case?
It is not the case.
Okay.
It's all of their bonus at site level is tied to customer satisfaction, where it ought to be.
Is there any way for them to doctor this customer satisfaction?
There's not.
Surveys?
It's all conducted by third parties. We don't conduct any surveys
Okay.
ourselves. But so that system had a lot of opportunity for manipulation of data. So we worked with the provider to ensure that local site teams have no ability to change the data. We also engage a third-party call center now that takes 100% of our calls, and so you got an independent third party that's documenting the timing of the receipt, the date of the receipt of that work request, so that it's not our staff that are inputting that information. If there's a recognized error in those work orders, and I heard some of this in the previous testimony, local site teams cannot make those adjustments. That has to be documented, justified, and it has to be approved up to a vice president level. If we make that change, we are transparent with our military partners for the reason why we made the change, to ensure that there's transparency and agreement with making that change.
So do you know what you're being investigated for by the Department of Justice right now?
Nothing that I'm aware of.
Are you aware there is a Department of Justice investigation?
Ongoing currently?
Yeah.
I'm not.
Okay, nor was I. Ms. Cook, how do you explain the email from Mr. Rodriguez when he's talking about the facilities in chaos? What was in chaos, do you know?
I believe, and if I may, Senator, I get thousands of emails in my email box every day, just as all of us do. So, you know, I definitely received it, but I do know that Tom went down there to help. We had lost a previous facility manager. I took it as his first observation of being on the ground, and he sent it to his supervisors that could help him pull it together in an action plan of how we're going to pull this to get.
So again, this is kind of an initial email. When he gets down there, he goes, man, this is a mess. This is in chaos, and I'm going to fix it for you. I mean, is that kind of how you interpreted it?
That's kind of how I remember it. Like I said, I get thousands of emails, so I would have to go back and review that, sir. But I do feel that Tom just had come on the ground, and he was reporting of what he's seeing on his.
So, Mr. Taylor, I want to go back, and I want to try and understand this business model. So tell me if I've got this right. So there's the actual construction phase of this, where you put in a very small percentage in terms of equity, and you leverage it up, and you're able to do that because it's housing for the military, so nobody's afraid that they're not going to get paid back. So I mean, you can literally build $1 billion of housing, and you're only investing what, 10 million maybe, 10 and a half to 15, 10 to 15 million?
Well, on that, I think every one of our projects, the equity contribution from the company was between 1% and 5%, so it varied.
So again, it could be 10 to 50 million.
It could, yes.
But again, if you're, but then your entire revenue stream is what you're telling me is $30 million a year.
Our property management fees on average over the last 3 years.
And that is your revenue stream, or is there some revenue stream from the construction part of this? I mean, are you making money on the construction?
When in the initial development period, when we were building out the housing, we had a third party and then a related third party that was our builder.
So again, let's say you construct $1 billion, you're act as a GC, and you may be getting 10% for that. So you make money on the actual construction of the housing unit, and then that's done.
A builder would have, but Balfour Beatty, as the developer, we earn development fees for the build out.
Okay, so you make money there, but then ongoing, it's literally that $30 million with 1,400 employees, with costs going up and down. Again, the reason I'm digging into this, I wouldn't invest in this business. Listen, I guess I appreciate the fact that you've got a commitment and you want to provide good housing for our service members, but unless I'm missing something here, it just seems like a pretty risky business.
It's not the only revenue source. That's the property management fees, Senator. I just want to make sure that we're clear. So the way that the projects are constructed, the majority of the cash flows left over after all the bills are paid, on average, about 90% of that goes to a project reinvestment account. That's there for long-term sustainment. It was always envisioned to be sufficient to take care of the housing over the balance of these 50-year agreements. Those reinvestment account funds are deployed when our military service partners are in agreement with what the plans for how we deploy those funds to make further improvements down the road. When that happens, again, we will earn development fees on that work. We will engage contractors to perform that work. So there's still opportunity for revenue or fees, but that was always envisioned in the construct of the deals. I talked about the equity investment that we made. 90% of that excess cash flow at the bottom of the waterfall goes to the reinvestment account. On average, about 10% comes to us as a return on that equity investment because we invested in the project as well.
Okay, the reason I'm trying to delve into the finances here is if a company like yours is not making money on this or making such a slim margin, so there's probably not much incentive for you to improve things. But if you're making a fair return, it's still a business that is attractive to you and others.
I don't agree with the statement that it doesn't incentivize to do a good job and improve things. Frankly, because everybody's well aware, our property management fees, that $30 million, is made up of a base management fee and then an incentive component. That incentive component was the issue that got us into the challenges with DOJ. But that incentive component, if we do our job well, there's opportunity for us to earn more money for the business. We're not a not-for-profit. We're a business just like every other provider is to try to be profitable.
So again, to kind of close this out, in your mind, I think I heard you testify that the solution here is better internal controls on part of you and probably your competitors in this space.
Absolutely.
And you think with better internal controls, you can satisfy the Miss Christians and our other witnesses?
We're seeing evidence of it already. The level of control and oversight that we have within our own organization, level of oversight that we see from our military partners, there's a lot more control over the activities that are happening on every one of these installations. It's in a better place, a heck of a lot better place today than it was 3 years ago.
So you have an independent company doing your surveys. Is there any other independent auditing of your performance?
All of our financials are independently audited.
Financially, yeah. I'm just talking about in terms of your performance.
The performance. There's annual CEL surveys that the service branches engage. You saw, the example that was on the screen on the right-hand side of the screen was the result of CEL scores that the service branches engaged, and then we have satisfacts for those. For the work we perform there.
This will be my last question, because I am disturbed about potential retaliation. And we heard that from, I think, all the witnesses. And I've seen that since I came to the Senate, coming from the private sector. I'm actually shocked at how much retaliation there is kind of within government, okay? And this would be within the military. Are you aware of that? And it sounds like, based on testimony, it's retaliation certainly participated in by members of Balfour staff, kind of in combination with some of the folks in the military.
I'm not aware of our staff retaliating against residents because they've expressed displeasure with our service.
Okay. Well, thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Ranking Member Johnson. And just to close out, I think it's worth recapping what you were getting into, Ranking Member Johnson, in terms of the structure of revenues. So just for clarity, with our final few moments here, Mr. Taylor, just describe one more time how this incentive fee structure operates, please.
So if you look at the cash flow waterfall for any project, as part of the operating expenses, there's typically a base management fee. It's usually on the order of 2% of revenues. After debt service is paid, after we put away money for capital repairs and replacement, we will qualify for incentive management fees. There's slight differences, but a lot of similarity between the way that each branch of service has negotiated the performance metrics within those. All of them have undergone a revamping in the last 3 years.
And if I might, those incentive fees, for example, the incentive payments that you will receive from that joint fund you've established with the service will be correlated with your performance, and among the metrics of performance will be the timely and successful closure of work orders, correct?
the timely response to emergency and urgent, the timely completion of routine service.
Right, so if there's an issue such as mold, which poses a health hazard, then that's classified differently with a different expectation of successful or timely response than, for example, a routine carpentry issue. Is that correct?
That is correct.
So when we see Sergeant Torres's work order, where he clearly stated in the description that it's mold, and then we see that it was classified as carpentry, that kind of thing could impact your incentive fees, correct? If the company, and this is, I believe, what was going on during the period of the scheme to defraud the United States, misclassification of a request for remediation of mold, which should be more timely acted on, as something like carpentry, will cause you to be paid more in incentive fees by artificially inflating your performance metrics, correct?
If the volume of that activity rose to the level that we would not meet the threshold, that's a correct statement. And it assumes that we didn't identify the error and put in place a correct the error. But again, to achieve the incentive fees, just to be totally transparent, it doesn't mean 100% success to qualify. There are graduated levels depending on that. So one or two work orders in and of itself being in error would not potentially impact whatsoever our incentive fees.
Thank you, Mr. Taylor. Thanks for that clarification. I want to thank the members who attended this hearing today. I want to thank all of the witnesses in both panels for their testimony and for appearing today before the subcommittee. We will continue to seek remedies for the issues discussed today. Our military personnel, stateside and abroad, sacrifice continually in service to this nation, as do their families. They deserve the very best. It is of utmost importance that they be provided with safe housing, that there be accountability within the department and by those companies responsible for providing that housing. This hearing record will remain open for 15 days for any additional comments or questions by any of the subcommittee members. And with that, this hearing is adjourned.